Chapter 65, Sunset Mountain Range, 2. Su Luo's gaze was clear and dainty, as she gave a superficial smile. What is there to fear? Don't tell me that you think I don't have even the slightest capacity to protect myself? Right now she did not really have any spiritual strength, but her previous life had provided her with more than 10 years of hellish training. Moreover, her career as an assassin wasn't just some useless walk in the park either. The kind of bloodthirsty instinct to slaughter had perfected a single-minded, fearless, and tenacious heart suddenly. A meaningful smile that was not quite a smile surfaced from the depth of Nangong Liuyun's eyes. He was currently hand in hand with Su Luo, when he suddenly pulled her behind his back and stopped in his tracks, not moving. His beautiful lily-white hands were holding Su Luo's hands. His gaze was languid and devilishly charming, yet it seemed to continuously hold a look of a ruthless tyrant. All of a sudden, his mouth elicited a sinister smile, and he unhurriedly let loose but 2 words. It's coming. What was coming? Su Luo's heart was full of curiosity. From his tall, straight and well-favored back she peeked out, following his gaze and looked toward the front. From a distance about more than 100 meters away, she saw an enormous coiled python. The python was no less than 10 meters long. Its lower body was coiled into a crude crater. The scales that covered its body was a gorgeous rainbow color. Its bloody mouth gaped wide open, like a sacrificial bowl, and its split tongue was the size of an average-sized snake, which gave off a vengeful and malevolent impression. Wild Serpent, 4th-ranked magical beast with a very strong attack power and highly poisonous. Nangong Liuyun's dark red lips softly informed, giving Su Luo the detailed explanation. If it were any other, he naturally would not have said a word. Hiss! Hisses! The large python's mouth hissed its snake-like tongue. Then its mouth let loose a dense green fog. At this time, a spotted deer, momentarily passing through without checking, became contaminated by the miasma. Not long after it had come in contact with the poison, the entire body of the spotted deer started to seize. It was as if its body was covered in some kind of corrosive. For even the naked eye could watch the rapid rate of decay, as it slowly claimed the deer. By the time it finally collapsed, there was only a white skeleton left. On the ground the dense green ink-like substance was similar to a carbonated juice, continuously releasing small air bubbles. The air still had a strong stench of rot. From start to finish, the spotted deer's decay, which started from being robustly alive to being a corroded puddle of melted flesh and bare bones took no more than 10 minutes. Such a toxic poison. Su Luo suddenly had a feeling of absolute horror. This poison was absolutely more terrifying than the most concentrated sulfuric acid. Despite this, the snake venom could indeed be great stuff for wiping out any trace of corpses. This function was why people would often journey far from home to obtain it. Su Luo asked herself honestly, in the event that she came across such a large python, if she wanted to beat it, it would nearly be impossible. Of course, if she fought with the thought of mutual destruction, it's not like she wouldn't have the ability to battle against it. In a brief moment, this giant python had given her a vivid lesson. The existence of the wild serpent taught her that once she entered Sunset Mountain Range, she must think of how to proceed carefully by adapting to the matters at hand. If she want to walk out safely and intact, in the forest she must take care with each and every step with constant vigilance. Nangong Liuyun's pair of deep eyes were like a night-black pearl in the middle of the deep sea, shimmering with luminous radiance. He smilingly said, "Girl, neglect the fundamentals and concentrate on the details. The most useful part of this wild serpent is not really its poison. Could it be its central monster core? Isn't it said that a snake's inner core can solve the riddle of hundreds of poisons?" Nangong Liuyun's dark red lips curved up into a mysterious smile. His eyes were overflowing with brilliant lights and vibrant colors. "Very soon you will know. The person who loved to keep people on tenterhooks the most was him." Su Luo somewhat frustratedly pouted her red lips. Before, what Lu Ruohua told him regarding her background, he had unexpectedly kept it a tightly held secret. He wouldn't even reveal even half a sentence to her. At this moment, the wild serpent had already discovered their presence. Its mouth, splitting out a snake-like tongue, slithered and crawled toward them. with fangs bared giving off a sinister appearance. However, what astounded Su Luo the most, it had unexpectedly completely ignored her and Nangong Luoyuan. It directly passed them and moved towards their rear. This in turn made Su Luo, who had been looking forward to Nangong Luoyuan battling it out with the wild serpent, somewhat disappointed. Chapter 66, Sunset Mountain Range 3. That was the place where Lu Ruohua's team was standing. But why? Could it be that the wild serpent knew that Lu Ruohua had a very black heart? But when discussing black hearts, whose could be more sinister than Nangong Luoyuan's? Nangong Luoyuan's eyes were as clear, bright and dazzling as cut diamonds. Their appearance was extremely good at hypnotizing people's wills, with an unusually violent, ruthless, and tyrannical power. He patted Su Luo's head, and a sly nefarious smile started to form from the depth of his eyes. Obediently watch the play. It will be absolutely marvelous, and this king guarantees that. Satisfied? Really? Then I must watch carefully. Su Luo crossed both of her arms over her chest. Calmly and at ease, she leaned on one side of Nangong Luoyuan's body, with a pondering smile in her eyes. When Lu Ruohua and her team saw the wild serpent, an expression of wild ecstasy flashed across their eyes. The reason they had come to Sunset Mountain Range had been to collect items, and one of their tasks was the acquisition of a wild serpent's monster core. Consequently, before they had entered Sunset Mountain Range, they spent a large sum of money to buy some crimson-hearted flower. Nothing was better than the crimson-hearted flowers to attract wild serpents. What they don't know was that this was the reason why Nangong Luoyuan had allowed them to continuously follow him. Because Nangong Luoyuan knew that if only relying on his own luck, he may not have good enough luck to bump into a wild serpent. But since Lu Ruohua's group brought with them the crimson-hearted flowers, the chances that they would encounter one were near definite. Wild serpent's inner core could neutralize hundreds of poisons, especially the miasma in the air around the forest. Therefore Nangong Luoyuan must prepare this item for Su Luo. Lu Ruohua's team had a total of 6 people, 2 women and 4 men. Their cultivations levels was around the 2nd to 3rd ranks. The 6 of them together attacked the wild serpent. In a matter of moments, water arrows, fireballs, wind blades, countless attacks were concentrated on the wild serpent's body. The wild serpent spit out its venom, and a dense dark green fog saturated the air in all directions. These bursts of loathsome noxious gas spread towards them. Its speed wasn't really that fast, but its face appeared to emit a malevolent smile, giving off a calm and composed serpent's hiss. Both sides' strength were seemingly comparable. Thus, they fought each other for a long time without success. No one side could prevail over the other, so for the moment, it was extremely difficult to determine the victors and the defeated. Suddenly under the sunlight, the flowery crown of top of the wild serpent started to shine and flicker. The multicolored rays of light it seemed to flash were as bright as the moon and would bring anyone an absolutely horrifying feeling of alarm and panic. Not good, loudly shouted Lu Weiming with an ashen face. This wild serpent is about to have a breakthrough. Everyone, quickly increase your efforts to kill it. We can't wait until it have advanced to the 5th rank, otherwise the only road left for us is death. The wild serpent was very vengeful, so if you attacked it and didn't kill it, it would always give chase after you until it had finally killed you. When comparing the strength of a 5th ranked versus a 4th ranked wild serpent, the difference was like heaven and earth, a distance that was just too huge. A 4th ranked wild serpent they could still fight. However, once the 5th rank was reached, they would only be tyrannized. But his discovery was a step too late. The entire body of the wild serpent was shrouded by golden rays of light, and the dark green fog continued to fill the air in all directions. Once again, a loathsome stench of poison floated around the forest in disarray. In an instant, the flowery crown on its head seemed to transform into a jade horn. The jade horn was exceptionally dazzling, and under the sunlight, it glistened so much that it lit up its surroundings. It existed as a continuous flow of brilliance, like an infinite number of lightning strikes. Heavens! This wild serpent actually knows lightning magic. Lu Weiming's face became pale. He felt like he was about to go mad. The lightning system's attack and firepower was the strongest among all the elements, And it was also very rare. Also among magical beasts, the cultivation of the lightning element was even more rare. Who would have known? One of their tasked items would be a freak of nature of such an extent. Issis. The jade horn on the wild serpent's head flashed with brilliant rays of light, with traces of thunder and lightning. Lu Weiming shouted loudly, "Retreat! Quickly retreat!" However, it was already too late. They could only watch as the jade horn on the head of the wild serpent's strong firepower pointed at its target and instantly struck home. Chapter 67, Sunset Mountain Range 4. At the locations where the jade horn pointed to, brilliant snake-shaped seeds would shoot towards there with astonishing quick speed. At this time, its jade horn was like machine gun. Bing! Bing! Bing sprayed the bullets. Sparks flew and dragon snakes danced in the air. The battlefield situation was extremely fierce. Lu Weiming was the first one to be hit, and could only see him momentarily stunned. His entire body was as rigid as steel. His hair was charred black and standing straight up. He was truly a very sorry figure at the moment. The second person to be hit was none other than Lu Ruahua. Because she had been wounded before, the marks of blood on her body were still not dried yet. Thus the wild serpent's attention was even more attracted to her. Very quickly this team was being taken advantage of by the wild serpent. The wild serpent was not in a hurry to kill off this team. It laughed malevolently, as its remote and icy cold expression locked onto them. Its eyes was so eerie that they penetrated into the depths of their souls. A pair of icy eyes glared at this team, making every one of them absolutely horrified. They were shivering in terror, and their hearts were extremely panicked. Team leader, quickly think of an idea. Team leader, save us. At this moment, almost all of them were urging Lu Weiming to act. After all, he had spoken with His Highness Prince Jin. It was for this reason that he was viewed the most suitable to speak on their behalf. Lu Weiming was still very anxious. Seeing the two people watching the play not far away, a complex expression flashed across his eyes. He knew, with His Highness Prince Jin's cold and detached personality, he probably would watch them all get swallowed up by the wild serpent. Afterwards, he might even turn around confidently, and with ease walk away. Compassion, sympathy, benevolence, these virtues would not appear on his body. At this time, the wild serpent was splitting out scarlet snake bombs. Lu Weiming's neck went back and forth. Finally, Lu Weiming's feet weakened at the knees, and he anxiously shouted, "Your Highness Prince Jin, save us. I beg your Highness, please. If your Highness don't take action now, we will definitely die." Nangong Luyan languishingly reclined against an ancient tree. His phoenix eyes narrowed, and the corner of his mouth lifted into a resplendent demonic smile. His bright blood-red lips shone like they were scattered throughout with glossy and shimmering gems. However, it remained silent, not saying a word. Seeing that His Highness hadn't the slightest thought of taking action, Lu Weiming and his companions were becoming very anxious. There was only one life, so once they were dead there was nothing. Each and every one of them was an arrogant, spoiled child of the heavens. How could they just die in such a helpless manner? One after another, each and every one of them shouted for help towards Nangong Luyan. Ah! Suddenly a desperate cry bursted out from among the crowd. As it turned out, it was from a youngster among the team. His entire right leg had been swallowed by the wild serpent in one bite. Immediately his leftover half of leg's blood rushed forth like spring water. It was so painful that he was rolling around on the ground. Furthermore, the tooth of a wild serpent contained highly toxic poison. It possessed violently strong corrosive properties. One could only see the youngster rolling around on the ground grabbing his right leg, as fresh blood was covered in countless tiny poisonous bubbles that burst forth. It seemed as though it was spreading from the bottom up. His entire body was in pain from the corrosion. It ought to be more painful than lingering at death's door from receiving a thousand's cut, or at least not far behind. As this youngster rolled around on the ground, he let loose another terrifying screaming. Finally, he just couldn't stand it. He pulled out a dagger and thrust it straight into his own heart. Watching the youngster, who had immediately become a white skeleton after his last breath, then recalling how just moments ago he had been so vividly alive among them, Lu Weiming and company momentarily had a sense of sympathy, for their like-minded comrades in distress. Even though it concluded this way, Nangong Luyan deep, dark eyes were just like the quiet ocean under the white clouds, tranquil and unfathomable. It was as if the death of the youngster was not even a bit gruesome to him. Only until this moment did Lu Weiming and company truly understood how cold-blooded and heartless His Highness Prince Jin really was. In the beginning they fancied the notion that they were lucky to be following behind His Highness Prince Jin. Even more, they earnestly hoped that at the time, when they came across danger, then they can obtain his helping hand. Naive, they were truly too naive. Chapter 68, Sunset Mountain Range 5. With expectations that those two cold-blooded people might have actually had a merciful heart, Lu Weiming and company were truly navy. Nangong Liuyun's naturally diabolical face flashed with waves of beautiful amethyst like luster on a lake. His expression was like the deep blue ocean under white clouds. They were so profoundly mysterious that nobody could guess what he was thinking about in his heart. However, Su Luo, who was of a similar type to him, realized his intentions, and her beautiful eyes vividly began to analyze the situation in full. A trace of interest flashed from their depths. Name a price. Everyone should be able to say how many silvers each of their lives is worth. Su Luo had an indifferent expression. Nangong Luyan evoked an expression that was like a smile yet not a smile. His handsome countenance was pretty yet threatening. Sure enough, the person who had understood him the most was his Luo girl. Lu Weiming would never have thought that the reason His Highness did not lend a hand was because he was waiting for them to offer him money. This was too. If you want to live, then quickly give me a quote, otherwise, who knows which of you next will be eaten alive by the wild serpent. Su Luo's beautiful eyes narrowed, and an unspeakable cunning evil smile appeared in its depth. At the same time her heart was being filled with secret curses and unspoken criticism. Nangong Luyan, you are too much. He obviously was targeting the jade horn on the wild serpent's head. No matter what they did, he would have killed the wild serpent. But still he insisted on letting these people spend money on purchasing their lives. What's even more, this wild serpent had only come out because Lu Weiming and company drew it out. Nangong Luyan was really grabbing feathers from a flying goose, calculated to the end. Sure enough, he had said he never invested in losing businesses. At least this point was indeed true. Under my name I have 5 stores, I can offer you all of it. I will use 2 manors with large gardens to exchange. I have 1,000 taels. Lu Ruohua saw the wild serpent kept rotating around her. Trembling with fear, she shrieked loudly. So in the end your life is only worth 1,000 taels? It's so very cheap. Su Luo with both hands encircled around her chest, with a smiling expression that was not quite a smile. The words coming out of her mouth had a double meaning. 10,000 tael. Ami-foot, Lu Ruohua was so scared that she started to cry loudly. It was unknown if Nangong Luyan was satisfied with the 10,000 tael, or if it was because he felt that leaving Lu Ruohua alive had a little more use. In short, just when the wild serpent was about to bit off Lu Ruohua's thigh, he acted. You could only see that Nangong Liuyun's entire body started to shine with golden rays of light. After that, it rapidly spread to the center of his palm. Finally, it followed along his fingers and shot outwards, like the golden tip of a double-edged sword. Swoosh, the sound rung. The golden tip ruthlessly pierced toward the wild serpent's heart. It passed right through the heart, leaving a cup-sized wound on its heart. Beforehand, Lu Weiming and company had released their strongest magical powers together. All types of fireballs, water arrows, wind blades techniques had smashed toward the serpent, but could not break through the wild serpent's defense. Nor could it get through the creature's scales to cause even a trace of injury to its skin. Yet Nangong Luyan could so easily dispatch it with merely a shot of golden double-edged sword tip. Like a knife cutting through tofu, it pierced straight through the very center of the wild serpent's heart, and left through its back. The wild serpent let out a loud painful howl, and then its enormous serpentine body segment by segment tumbled heavily to the ground. It produced a huge noise that lasted for a long while, as it kicked up a giant cloud of dust from the ground. When it fell to the ground, its eyes refused to close, and even in death, it seemed to still be holding grudges within its expression. The serpent head appeared to be malevolent and terrifying. One move. But he just used only one move? And it was just a slight wave of his sleeves? Lu Weiming, Lu Ruohua, and the rest of their company had opened their eyes wide, staring firmly at Nangong Luyin. Their mouth opened in an O shape, and could not say a word. They all knew that Nangong Luyin was very powerful, but they couldn't have imagined he would be so strong to such an extent. Together, with the 6 of their strengths combined, they couldn't even wound the wild serpent. Yet Nangong Luyin, with just a wave of his hand, was able to kill the wild serpent. Chapter 69, Sunset Mountain Range 6. Everyone was watching Nangong Luyin, with eyes full of worship and adoration. Especially Lu Ruohua and another girl Li Wan, whose eyes, in addition to being filled to the brim with vigor, also emitted infatuated obsessiveness from their expressions when looking at Nangong Luyin. Cut it off. Nangong Liuyun's appearance was picturesque, and his eyes were like a cold heavenly body. Its depth appeared to let loose icy rays of indifference. His nonchalant voice commanded. The crisis had been removed, so everybody let loose sighs of relief. Lu Weiming wiped off a handful of perspiration from his forehead. Cheerfully and diligently, he ran up to carefully cut off the jade horn, and deferentially presented it to Nangong Luyin with both of his hands. Somewhat indecisively he once again hesitated as he said, "Your Highness, do you want this jade horn?" With regards to such a high-level expert like His Highness Prince Jin, this jade horn won't be considered very useful, right? Nangong Luyin lifted an eyebrow and shot him a quick glance. A pair of icy eyes, whose depth was able to mesmerize people, slowly made their intentions clear. Suddenly his scarlet, blood-red lips lifted into a devilishly alluring sneer. Lu Weiming's lungs felt as if they had been blocked by a boulder. An oppressive feeling, to the point where he couldn't breathe. He cowered, trembling from head to toe and covering his chest in fear. He was unable to speak a single word. Nangong Luyin threw him a faint sideway glance and handed the jade horn to Su Luo. His eyebrows gently rose, carrying in limitless indulgent spoiling manner. His smile was full of tender feelings. "It looks quite nice, take it and play with it as you wish." "Don't want it." Su Luo's pair of clear and bright eyes unenthusiastically looked at him. She nevertheless quite bluntly refused. "Without effort the rewards is undeserved." "Don't want it." Lu Weiming and his group of people were practically weeping blood from their heart. Was this young lady's brain scared stupid? This was the wild serpent's jade horn. Its jade horn. Numerous people, in an attempt to obtain it, had risked their lives and died trying. But she had actually said that she didn't want it. In this case, it was even more true that constantly comparing oneself to others will only make one angry. How could His Highness Prince Jin unexpectedly and biasly treat her so well? Lu Ruohua bit her lower lips, nearly chewing the gums of her mouth to pieces. She was so envious that she nearly went insane. Nangong Luyin still had the indulgent spoiling smile that filled his eyes. He gently rubbing her head. "If you don't want it then just throw it away. It's not as if it's some valuable stuff." Throw it away? In a split second, almost all of their eyes were concentrated on the jade horn lying on top of Su Luo's white slender palm. Their eyes clearly were expectantly waiting for her to throw it away without delay. Su Luo saw their eager expressions turn expectant to the point where they began to salivate. Her heart secretly felt that it was laughable, but her mouth only said, "Since this being the case, then well, I'll first help you take care of it. Whenever you think of it then I'll return it to you." Nangong Luyin was non-committal, but once the words were spoken, Lu Weiming's type of people's disappointment was one that you could imagine. Nangong Liuyun's body showed a cold, indifferent intention. His expression was alienating and unsympathetic, coldly looking in disgust at Lu Weiming. Inner core. Lu Weiming's expression was as usual. However, his heart was secretly whining about his bitter luck. With His Highness Prince Jin's type of strength, how could he still cared about the inner monster core of the wild serpent? He originally thought to take advantage of the confusion to remove the inner core, because this was one of their tasked item. But since His Highness Prince Jin mentioned it by name, how could he dare to even covet it silently? He dug out the inner core and after washing it cleanly, he placed it into a box made of white jade. Only then did Lu Weiming deferentially presented it to Nangong Luoyuan. Lu Weiming got up his nerves, took courage and weakly asked, "Your Highness, this inner core. Does your Highness want to sell it?" However, what made them envious was Nangong Luoyuan again, directly handed the small jade box to Su Luo. Keeping silent nevertheless provided the best answer. But that is our tasked item, and also the wild serpent was drawn out by us. Lu Ruohua felt aggrieved and argued noisily in a loud voice. She felt it was really unfair. Su Luo did not even lift a finger. Instead she just stood there and watched the show. In the end all the spoils of war just ran into her arms. How could you ask her to swallow down such indignation? Chapter 70 Sunset Mountain Range 7. Not fair. Nangong Luoyuan's red lips raised slightly into a nefariously charming smile. His pair of star-shaped eyes contained an intense killing intent, as he stared at her scornfully with icy cold eyes. Fair? What kind of thing is that? He doted on little Luo Luo, because she will be a part of his family. Who needed others to make thoughtless remarks? Was it because these people were tired of living? Lu Weiming threw at Lu Ruohua a harsh glare, and said in a stern voice, "What nonsense are you saying? If it weren't for His Highness Prince Jean lending a hand, we would have already been completely wiped out. You still think that you can take the spoils of war for free?" Su Luo secretly pondered. This Lu Weiming was actually not so foolish. He was able to judge the hour and size up the situation. Also his words left some leeway. If he didn't think of taking it for free, then was he going to use some means to exchange for it? Su Luo was shaking the inner core inside the jade box, with a smile yet not a smiling expression that contained some self-evident meaning. Lu Weiming with a cajoling smile asked, "Miss Su, this inner core is something that we have a reason to acquire, and must insist on obtaining it. I don't know if you would be willing to be parted from it." However, before even waiting for Su Luo to reply, Nangong Luoyuan directly seized the jade box. Then he picked up the sparkling and translucent inner core, that could shone through flesh or bones, and placed it into his mouth. At that moment, everybody was unable to make sense of what they were seeing, and also, what was the intent behind His Highness Prince Jin's act. However, in the next moment, Nangong Luoyuan's unyieldingly powerful palm took hold of the back of Su Luo's head. His other hand was wrapped around her slender waist. A dense and heavy shadow started to loom ever closer to Su Luo. In the next instant Su Luo was being kissed, the type that was like an electric shock that rendered her limp and numbed her limbs when it swept through her entire body. The kiss had come too suddenly. It also seemed to have been timed perfectly. The surrounding area had become silent with only the gentle sound of the wind. Only the roars of dragons and whistles of the tigers sounded from afar, could be heard. Lu Ruohua had almost chewed her lips to a pulp. Li Wan's meaningful glare was about to bore a hole through Su Luo. With His Highness Prince Jean, how could this be possible? His Highness Prince Jean was a matchless noble existence. He was likened to the gods of heaven in their 9-pagoda palace. How could Su Luo the slut be worthy of him? Everyone had their eyes opened wide in disbelief. Yet at this moment, Nangong Luoyuan was kissing Su Luo with reverence, and was dragging it on lingeringly, unruffled by their sentiment. Thus the inner core of the wild serpent was delivered directly into Su Luo's mouth. Su Luo was choking on it, and she started to cough. In a panic she pushed Nangong Luoyuan away. Nangong Luoyuan did not try to prevent her from doing it. He only heartwarmingly and tenderly watched the slightly panicked Su Luo. His mouth had hooked into a smug, and toying with someone for amusement kind of smiling expression. His star-shaped eyes, below his sword-like eyebrows, held a devilish enchanting charm, and seemed to be covered with a layer of haze. It was hard to make out, but it was still glistening and dazzling in a way that brightens up a room. Su Luo very fiercely glared at Nangong Luoyuan, but those eyes gave off a beautiful mist, making people who see them founding it to be clever, and to give them a special feeling. Nangong Luoyuan's wicked hands stroked toward the side of his own lips, wishing to use his fingers to continue caressing her abdomen. Su Luo had lifted her skirt, and heavily stepped on his foot. Nangong Luoyuan was loudly begging for mercy, his face brimming with a resplendent and careless smile. His bright and clear laughter was echoing around. Su Luo heard his laugh, and was even more humiliated into anger. "Luo girl, this time you are mistaken about this king's action." Nangong Luoyan immediately lifted up his hands in surrender, showing off his obedience, and said, "The wild serpent's inner core's poisonous nature is extremely fierce. Only by using this method will you be prevented from being harmed by it." It seemed somewhat reasonable. Su Luo's beautiful eyes was moving around. She menacingly arched her eyebrows. "This time I'll let you go. Next time I'll pay more attention and take note of it." Between the two of them, they seemed to be at swords drawn and bows bent. However, in another's eyes it seemed as if they were having a flirtatious exchange. This scene was extremely ambiguous. Lu Weiming with an extremely disappointed look gazed at Su Luo. The inner core was already swallowed by her. It could never be taken back. In fact, how could he have known that Nangong Luoyan since the beginning had calculated and planned for getting his hand on the wild serpent's inner core? Otherwise, with regards to his personality, why would he have let those people follow behind him? So till the end, no matter what, this inner core would eventually be delivered into Su Luo's mouth. Just at this time, from the distant horizon, waves of melodious heavenly music could be heard. Chapter 71. A Pair of Jade Annulus 1. Around a dozen or so maidens with lily-white hands like the long and delicate lotus roots were holding baskets full of blooming flowers. They were divided into 2 rows, and were quickly treading towards them in the air. A rush of wind, like the clear sound of moving water, brushed by. Swathes of captivating red cherry blossoms floated down like a snowfall being carried by a breeze, fluttering about and sprinkling behind sparkling and translucent snow-like petals. This scene was exceptionally beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. Every one of them was clothed in a white silken dress, with straight and proper postures. Although their individual features were by no means considered beautiful, each and every one of them was slender, simple, and neat. Too elegant and exquisite to be from this earth. Their entire bodies seemed not to have been touched even a little by the vulgarness of the mortal world. They seemed like immortal beings flying by in a realm high above the common populace. Their 10 fingers were slender, their waists were slim, and their footsteps were lithe and lively like an approaching wave of ageless fairies. They also looked like elfin spirits who just started to dance, so beautifully that they could mesmerize one to the point of not being able to turn away. In their midst, there was a flowery litter so refined and lavish that it would stifle people into silence. It was carried by 4 maidens in a nimble and lively manner. In almost no time, this flowery litter gently landed. It steadily and securely halted in front of Nangong Luoyan. Such a grand show gave off an imposing loftiness that was the mark of high status. Who knew which divine place was the person in the flowery litter from? Su Luo's heart was secretly curious. She lifted her eyebrows and looked at Nangong Luoyan. She saw the corner of his mouth at this moment started to raise slightly. Inside that smile contained a gorgeous resplendent brilliance, as if the corner of his eyes and the tip of his eyebrows were both carrying a smiling expression. Su Luo could say with certainty that this person was Nangong Luoyan's old acquaintance. Moreover, he was very happy to see this person. Su Luo's eyes faintly narrowed, but her face remained calm and collected. As time passed in her heart, she became even more interested in the person in the flowery litter. The flowery litter halted and was lowered. A slender, fair hand lifted itself to part the hanging curtain of green jade beads that surrounded the litter. From the interior, a fairy-like girl in the prime of her youth unhurriedly strolled out. One could only see her body, clothed in white that was as pure and holy as snow. Her dress stood against the wind with the skirt flying naturally, like a winter snow fairy, that drifted above the mundane world of man. Also there were splendid lights that radiated from her. Its brilliance could blind someone. Her long hair dangled down to her ankles. The fine black hair danced carelessly along with the breeze, similar to an immortal fairy on the verge of leaving with the wind. She rode the wind evanescently, like a dying firework slowly fading into nothingness. Her eyelashes were just like butterfly wings, sweeping up and down while painted in a thick and rich black color. Her eyes resemble misty water droplets, and maintained an unmatched grace and peacefulness. Her neck was delicate and graceful, her skin like crystallized amber with ice-colored flesh and bones formed from jade. This was a woman at the pinnacle of feminine beauty, as if she was a beautiful spirit emerging from an orchid hidden away in an empty valley. It was as if thousands of living things collected their best features and integrated into her entire body, in an attempt to shame the people in front of her into feeling the helpless nature of their inferiority. Currently, she stood filling the surrounding with her presence. Her lips were like a puckered red cinnabar, with a simple and neat complexion that displayed such a rare beauty. As she silently watched Nangong Luyan, she seemed to be holding in a thread of light laughter. Her eyes seemed to be apathetic and alienating, but they were also covered in a layer of watery mist. Behind the watery mist was an expression full of tender-hearted feelings. Nangong Luyan's always chilly and cruel icy eyes appeared to have become like a thin seam that cracked open. His beautiful eyes were pitch black as ink and serene, with its hidden depth that held his source of demonic charm. His smile widened with an overflowing exuberance. He treated her very familiarly, and also seemed to hold her very close and dear. Completely different from the approach he used on Su Luo. "Why did you come?" Nangong Luyan's snowy eyes appeared to show a slight concern. "Didn't you also come?" Her smile was very pretty. Her butterfly wing-like eyelashes gently blinked, sweeping up and down. Her beautiful eyes were hazy like watery mist. I could still see the pity. The two of them laughed and spoke quietly as if in their own world, and other people were just superfluous. Lu Ruohua stood by Su Luo's side. Now the sneer on her face was very much oblivious. She attempted to cruelly taunt Su Luo. "You really think that His Highness Prince Jin will like you? Did you not examine whether you match up to him?" Su Luo's dark black eyes under the sunlight illuminated a clear reflection of cold, gorgeous color and luster. She threw a quick glance at her with a smile that was not a smiling expression. The result of meddling in other people's business wouldn't be very wonderful. While speaking, her line of sight landed on Lu Ruohua's right hand that was cut off at the wrist and wrapped up in gauze. The depth of Lu Ruohua's eyes was full of a vicious hatred. But soon, she gave a cold and dark laugh. "Don't you see? The two of them are a true match, made by heaven and arranged on earth one. You are merely the mud under the soles of his feet, not even worthy to lift His Highness Prince Jin's shoes. One, made by heaven and arranged by earth, Chinese idiom meaning, ideal and perfect match made in heaven or made for one another." Chapter 72, A Pair of Jade Annulus, too, really? Su Luo lazily smiled. When had the words, "I like the godlike, noble Prince Jin" described by them, ever come out of her mouth? Boring commoners were always so laughable. Despite the notion that you don't care about something, others seemed to stubbornly insisted that you do. What's more, at the same time, they tried to deride you for not caring. Open your eyes and look closely. That person is the Jade Lake Palace's young princess. People call her Jade Lake's fairy. Regardless of whether it's innate talent, accomplishments in martial arts, or even family background, none of it is something you a good-for-nothing can compare. You still don't get it, right? In everyone's eyes those two were made for one another like a pair of jade annulus. There won't exist an even more suited pair than them. Lu Ruohua's eyes were filled to the brim with maliciousness and a mocking disdain that seemed to take joy in calamity and delight in disaster. 1. If she couldn't be with him, then Su Luo, this lump of mud, even more shouldn't think about it. Really? Su Luo's expression was indifferent, apparently unconcerned. She nonchalantly seized up the immortal fairy not far from her. This was the most suitable companion in the legendary rumor. They stood facing each other, and it seemed like a painter's masterpiece of being in love and inseparable in the human world inked on a picture scroll. Nangong Liuyun's phoenix eyes were narrowed. His features were picturesque with red alluring lips. A head of fine, jet-black hair poured down in torrents. A faint flirtatiously fiendish charm exuded from his entire persons, which was currently giving off a very languid air. Clothed in a dark, mysterious robe traced with hidden patterns of bright embroidery, the hem of his brocade robe was lifted gently by gusts of wind. It was elegantly and gracefully dancing in the breeze like a brightly colored butterfly. The Jade Lake Fairy's features were fine and slender like sculpted gems. Her lips were a frosty cherry color and emitted a bright glossy sheen. Her neck was delicate and graceful. Her skin was like ice that glowed with the luster of gems. Dressed in snow white, inviting skirt, she gave the appearance of a simple and elegant immortal with a manner that was exceedingly untouched and above the common people. One individual was handsome and outstandingly talented. The other individual was devastatingly beautiful, capable of causing the downfall of a city or state. One was devilish charming, and the other rose from the perfection of nature. Although Lu Ruohua was annoying, but her words were not false. Nangong Luyan and the Jade Lake Fairy were indeed the perfect match, like a pair of jade annulus made by heaven and arranged by earth too. Su Luo folded both her arms and narrowed her beautiful eyes slightly. Just in this way, she unconcernedly stood in her original place for a long time, motionless while quietly watching them. Currently, it seemed as if suddenly Nangong Luyan just thought of something. He glanced back and beckoned to Su Luo. However, Su Luo only raised her dainty, slender eyebrows, returning his look with a smile that was not a smile. What was the meaning of this? Does he think that merely by summoning her with just a wave, that she would just go to him? Was she, Su Luo, in his eyes just so contemptible? That Jade Lake's holy maiden laughingly looked over. Her shapely eyebrows resembled crescent moons. The black painted eyebrows against the backdrop of her white powdered face gave off a gem-like luster of someone inseparably in love. Her shoulders seemed to be carved like a sculpture with a naturally balanced waist. Her flesh was glowing like crystallized amber, and had a serene presence like that of a secluded orchid. A pair of limpidly bright and intelligent eyes watched Su Luo. It was so beautiful that it was practically earth-shaking, and made people suffocate. It made people feel inferior such that they were unable to bear it, thus lowering their head in terror. The corner of Su Luo's mouth rose slightly in welcome, and betrayed not a bit of weakness in any regard. A pair of beautiful, pure and deep eyes was so clear as to be moving, as if it can see through everything. Considering her imposing manner, why would Su Luo, who walk out from the middle of foul wind and bloody rain for more than 10 years, be afraid of her? The two of them silently looked eye to eye. For a while, the surrounding area was quiet, and the spectacle seemed to hold a little awkwardness. However, just at this time, an unforeseen event was suddenly born. Suddenly, from the depths of the mountain range, came an extremely sharp burst of chirping. As this sound pierced through the sky, it resembled gold grinding on stone. To hear it made people's eardrums sting with extreme pain. A buzzing sound echoed through the area. Their heartbeats throbbed violently with the blood vessels bursting open so energetically that it caused people to almost faint. At this moment, everyone was shocked. Everyone all looked toward the direction where the sound came from. In the distance, a mysterious force seemed to circulate. The earth and sky radiated with brilliance. All of a sudden, a flaming red-colored lightning streaked across the horizon, and the flash quickly passed. Afterwards, vast stretches of flame soared like a raging blaze, emitting resplendent light. It was as if it desired to envelope chunks of the entire sky and burn them fiercely. Phoenix! Fire Phoenix! Nobody knew who pointed to the horizon at the brutal image that quickly flashed by, while excitedly shrieking loudly, "Dragon! There is also a divine dragon!" Again, someone else immediately followed with the excited shout. Chapter 73. A pair of jade annulus. 3. Both the phoenix and dragon race had almost all but disappeared on this continent. Who would have thought that their silhouettes would actually simultaneously appear today? The so-called dragon that Su Luo had to kill was only an armored-back dragon. That kind of dragon, and this divine dragon of legend, were fundamentally two different concepts. The appearance of the phoenix and divine dragon excited everyone greatly, but their current situation was extremely unfavorable. This was because the bloody battle being carried out by the two divine beasts was causing trouble for the magical beasts in the Sunset Mountain range below them. At this moment, almost all the magical beasts were wildly dashing outwards in order to avoid any troublesome accidental encounter, and attempting to keep away from the two divine beasts locked in battle. Currently, there were countless number of magical beasts violently charged towards them at full speed like the tide. It was aggressive and impossible to block. This situation isn't good. Nangong Liuyun's tempting purple eyes held a dense coldness. Indeed, a wave of magical beasts is coming. Jade Lake's holy maiden answered indifferently. A wave of magical beasts. The expressions on each and every other person's had changed greatly, and their eyes were filled with terror. Even though they had never experienced a magical beast stampede, they had already been warned by their teachers about how terrifying it was. Whenever a magical beast wave appeared, martial artists at the scene would almost always barely escape, but at the same time, this fortuitous encounter was an occurrence that happened once in a century. Because whenever a magical beast wave happened, a peerless treasure would always inevitably appear. It was extremely possible that what those two almost extinct divine beasts were fighting over was a heavenly treasure. At the center of the forest, the Jade Lake's holy maiden's beautiful eyes were indifferent as she suddenly turned her head. She wished to continue talking, but then stopped. She tilted her head as her beautiful eyes exchanged meaningful looks with Nangong Luoyan. Nangong Luoyan's charming eyes looked at Su Luo, and the bright radiance in the depths of his eyes dimmed for a split second. Every time a magical beast wave occurred, although it was dangerous, it was still a rare, hard-to-come-by opportunity. If it was in the past, he would naturally go onwards and explore. However, the one next to him was Su Luo, who had no spiritual power. He could guarantee his own safety if he had to withdraw, but he could not say that she would certainly come out unscathed. Su Luo had on a completely carefree expression. With her clear eyes that could vividly see everything, she casually glanced at him. "You can go, don't worry about me." After saying that, a trace of loneliness suddenly flashed through her heart. Even though Lu Ruohua was hateful, what she had said was right. With her current strength, she didn't even have the qualification to stand by his side. He and the Jade Lake's holy maiden were the ones in their own world. Their strengths were appropriately equivalent, and their identities were compatible. And she seemed to be in disregarded tiny insignificant existence that could only look up towards them from an extremely low point of view in their presence. This kind of feeling was extremely unpleasant. A trace of sympathy flashed through Nangong Luoyan's clear and intelligent eyes. He rubbed her little head. "How can I not care about you? What nonsense." After finished speaking, he turned his head and smiled towards the Jade Lake's holy maiden. "Be careful. No matter what, a mere treasure is not as important as your life." He said it in a warm and gentle tone of voice, completely unlike the ice-cold cruel way he uses with others. "Thank you for the warning." Jade Lake's holy maiden's pure eyes were touching, and her faint laugh was like a cool breeze gently passing by, without any startling ripples or extremely varying emotions. As light as water, her gaze gently landed on Su Luo's face, yet a terrifying piercing cold feeling suddenly went down Su Luo's back. Is this woman, really as she's portrayed herself, like lifeless water? Without sorrow or joy and free from mortal vulgarity? A hint of suspicion flashed through the depths of Su Luo's heart, as her heart sensed a sort of bad premonition. Su Luo did not dare to say that her sixth sense was infallible, but it had never been wrong for all these years. Chapter 74. To subdue a foolish, adorable, pampered spirit. 1. Countless magical beasts rushed toward them in a violent surge with an imposing manner and a scathing murderous killing intent. 2 feet simply could not hope to outrun 4-legged magical beasts. And even if they managed to outrun, it also doesn't necessarily mean they would come out unscathed. The depths of Nangong Luoyan's eyes contained a thick chill. He picked up Su Luo and whirled his body around, flying towards the nearby small wooden house on top of a tree. Lu Ruohua and her companions imitated Nangong Luoyan one after another. Every one of them used both their hands and feet together to quickly climb up the millennium-old ancient trees. They tightly hugged the tree branches, hoping that they could escape this wave of magical beasts. Jade Lake's fairy turned her body around and looked toward Nangong Luoyan with a detached expression. She saw his silhouette carrying Su Luo in his arms. Her elegant and vibrantly beautiful eyes seemed to be covered in a layer of watery mist. Nobody understood the meaning hidden in the depth of her eyes that were as pitch black as ink. Her face lacked expression, and her red lips slightly opened into an arc, evoking a trace of an impassive smile. Her jade arms clenched at her thin misty green full-length muslin gown that swept the floor as if it was leaving behind a trail of running water. Immediately, The light muslin danced in the breeze like fireworks that become faintly discernible before fading into nothingness. The Jade Lake's fairy whirled and immediately flew away in a graceful and naturally relaxed manner. Around a dozen maidservants by her side were shrouded in icy cold expressions as they coldly launched their gazes at Su Luo. Soon after, they too followed her and flew away. Su Luo's thin eyebrows hesitantly knitted. Her intuition told her that this Jade Lake's fairy smile was somewhat mysterious. Sure enough, just when she had flown a short distance away, numerous vultures suddenly surrounded them in a circle. The Vulture King seemed to be fixated on the Jade Lake's fairy, and each maneuver was filled with malicious ruthlessness. The Vulture King was a 7th-ranked magical beast. It was also a flying-type magical beast. Compared to similarly ranked land-type magical beast, it was even more difficult to handle. At this time, Jade Lake's fairy's circumstances appeared to be extremely dangerous. The Vulture King was in hot pursuit of the Jade Lake's fairy, as it followed tightly behind her. It seemed that the Jade Lake's fairy was about to lose her life under the sharp claws of the Vulture King. Nangong Liuyan's star-shaped eyes held a complicated light, and his expression fluctuated between brightness and darkness, while being profoundly mysterious. Suddenly, he hugged Su Luo to him and left a passionate kiss on her bright and clean jade-like forehead. His serious expression condensed into an austere stare directed toward Su Luo. "Be good. Just stay here and wait for me. Don't go anywhere else." Before the words completely left his mouth, and without waiting for Su Luo's reply, his body had already elevated to midair. Fast as lightning, he rushed toward the place where the Jade Lake's fairy was. "Nangong Liuyan, you keep on saying that you like me, but when all's said and done, in your heart she is still more important." The corner of Su Luo's mouth rose into a faint and bitter laugh, such that even she did not realize. A poignant and acerbic meaning was mixed within her bitter laughter. Now Su Luo finally understood why the Jade Lake's fairy was smiling before with such a hidden meaning. This woman, her appearance and martial arts, were both viewed as at the top. In addition, her sophisticated shrewdness and scheming was also very deep. And on top of that, her extraordinary family background. Gods were truly generous in their treatment of her, providing her with a gifted advantage. As expected, this kind of talented person was really Nangong Liuyan's perfect match. How could she, Su Luo, the unfavored, good-for-nothing, common woman from a great general's manor, be considered as something? Su Luo coldly smiled, set aside all her negative mood, and started to size up the small treehouse. The small treehouse was very clean, roughly about 10 square meters of space. Inside the treehouse, besides the woven mat spread on the floor, there was nothing else. Su Luo motionlessly and quietly sat in the small treehouse. Perhaps it was because of the loneliness of a person being isolated in the way she was, but Su Luo's thoughts had a strong feeling of disappointment. In her previous life, she had been a renowned assassin, who was the cause of the sentencing and the obliteration of numerous people. The vast majority of the people were just a mark to her. But ever since having arrived in this world, she frequently felt as though she was being thwarted by the gods. Here she was only a member of the ordinary people. She could rely on her previous incarnation's skills to defeat a first-ranked Suwan. However, if she were to genuinely battle it out with the second-ranked Sushi, she may not necessarily be able to win. Chapter 75. To subdue a foolish, adorable, pampered spirit too, let alone daring to challenge someone as strong as the Jade Lake's fairy. Yes, the Jade Lake's fairy continuously smiled at her, with an ordinary expression which lacked emotions. But from within her smile, Su Luo could clearly read her state of mind, and it showed a kind of disdain. She had exuded an air of contempt, as if to say, just by a slight move of her finger, she could squish Su Luo like a bug. This type of impression made Su Luo feel extremely out of sorts. Within her heart, a raging fighting spirit had been ignited. She, Su Luo, was not a good-for-nothing. On the contrary, she was a super-gifted genius with an affiliation for 3 elemental systems. If she was only given a chance, her future accomplishments would not be any bit inferior to others. Su Luo made a fist. This time, She must find dragon's blood in order to open up her space element. This way, her wood and fire dual systems wouldn't be firmly suppressed, giving her the opportunity to start cultivating. Otherwise, no matter how great her innate talent, it would still be useless. The person she was right now could be considered the richest individual under the heavens. There were mountains of gold and silver within her grasp, but up until now, she couldn't find the keys to open the door. She could only gaze at the ocean and lament her inadequacy from outside the door. Time passed slowly bit by bit. However, Nangong Luyan hadn't returned yet. She was not sure what had happened, because all of the magical beasts had run away. For at this time, the surroundings were very still and quiet. The stillness was strangely eerie, like the calm before the storm. Suddenly, the storm winds began to rise. The powerful gale whistled and screamed with blasts that made the entire earth tremble. The small treehouse swayed and tottered in the wind's midst. Su Luo leaned forward and looked out the window. Laid before her was the scene of a tornado as black as ink, moving rapidly while roaring towards her exact location. It was similar to a giant creature that extended its bloody mouth wide open like a sacrificial bowl, too, with thunderous snarls, while baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. 3. It was as if both heaven and earth allowed it to do whatever it pleases. Nobody could possibly prevent it. The tornado came hurtling past. The small wooden house teetered on the verge of collapse. In order to not be blown away flying, Su Luo tightly clutched a pillar. Suddenly, Su Luo became aware that under her foot she sensed bouts of earth quaking and the mountain shaking. She looked out the tiny window and couldn't help be somewhat flabbergasted. She discovered that her entire person, it should be more accurate to say the entire small treehouse, had actually been lifted from the ground. Very quickly, the small treehouse broke away from the 1,000-year-old ancient tree trunk. It was uprooted, and the tornado swept it up into midair. However, it could be deemed fortunate that the small treehouse hasn't collapsed and fallen apart. Rather, it still stood firmly. But still, Su Luo's complexion had turned somewhat pale. She visually estimated that her current distance from the ground was roughly about 100 meters. If she was to fall from such a height, she would become nothing but torn body and crushed bones. 5. Not even crumbs would remain. She have yet to cultivate flying techniques. If she fell down, then there was only one word: death. Su Luo aggravatedly scratched her head. That damned Nangong Luyan. He only knew how to be concerned about the Jade Lake's ferry, while leaving her as he pleased in a random spot at the original place. And also that damn tornado. Why sweep up the small wooden house where she was? Obviously there were still other small tree houses over there. Like this, she could also be chosen? In the end, what kind of luck was this? Su Luo was hit by a moment of extreme speechlessness. The surrounding gale of the tornado rages on. However, in the eyes of the tornado the breeze was still, and waves were quiet. 6. At present, Su Luo sat in the faintly fluttering small treehouse, just as if she was sitting in a hot air balloon. Now if someone was to see this, they would certainly be stupefied such that their chin would drop to the ground. Because the people of this world had never seen a house flying in the sky. Could this be considered the first time since the beginning of history? Just when Su Luo had become all too nervous, suddenly, a tiny spherical body was thrown into the small wooden house. It tumbled to the floor and rolled about until it finally stopped by Su Luo's feet. This spherical object. Su Luo meticulously looked it up and down. In her heart a trace of misgivings flashed through. It looked like a type of egg. Moreover, it was a very large egg. Could it be that even flying in the sky, she could still pick up an egg? Was it possible for the mother bird to be flying and laying an egg at the same time? At that moment, 3 black lines appeared on Su Luo's forehead. 1. Gaze at the ocean and lament her inadequacy. Idiom. To feel powerless and incompetent to perform a task. 2. Bloody mouth wide open like a sacrificial bowl. Idiom. Ferocious mouth of beast of prey. Greedy exploiter, rapacious aggressor. 3. Baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Idiom. To make threatening gestures. 4. Earth quaking and the mountains shaking. Could also mean tremendous battle. 5. Torn body and crushed bones. Figuratively meaning to die horribly. To sacrifice one's life. 6. Breeze was still, and waves were quiet. Idiom. tranquil environment. All is quiet, a dead calm at sea. Chapter 76. To subdue a foolish, adorable, pampered spirit 3. She pulled back her train of thought that was indulging in flights of fancy. 1. Su Luo's attention was, without exception, completely concentrated upon the egg. This egg was no less than the size of a soccer ball. The outer shell was white and glossy with colored rays of light, like the luster of gems shining through. Occasionally a stream of light would also streak across the top. It gave off a dense and mysterious air. Suddenly, rustling noises could be heard from inside the egg, as if the small creature within was trying to break out of its shell and enter the world. Su Luo was immediately struck dumb. Impossible, right? How could this egg, against all expectations, just happen to hatch out of the blue like this in the sky? However, as if in response to her amazement, the top of the egg promptly split open, and a thin crack appeared on the surface. Afterwards, the crack became wider and wider until crisp bump, bump, bump noises could be heard. Su Luo held her breath in rapt attention, and her eyes opened wide while watching the spectacle before her. She saw, from the fragmented pieces of eggshell on the topmost part of the egg, a tiny head covered with some shattered pieces of eggshells, slowly but surely make its way out. It naively, adorably and unsteadily, rotated its tiny head. What kind of creature is this? Su Luo had never seen one like it before. But this little thing looked too adorable. A round puffy little head, simple and strong. That was absolutely adorable. Both of its eyes were closed tightly like a newborn. The corner of its mouth was dribbling out a lot of tiny little bubbles. It seemed somewhat dejected because apart from its head, the rest of its body was still in the eggshell. She could only see its eyes were still closed. It had a rosy red moist little mouth which was very small, but its nibbling speed was very fast. The little thing looked like it was nibbling on a large piece of round bread. It first nibbled away at the eggshell near its mouth, then slowly extended to the surrounding area. It finally finished eating the entire eggshell, then used its nose to sniff around as if looking for something else. Throughout the entire process, its eyes remained closed, giving it a charmingly innocent impression. Su Luo's heart became curious. What is this little thing that just broke through its eggshell looking for? In the midst of her curious musings, the little thing took some shaky steps with its thin, delicate legs, and swayed drunkenly about, tottered to the side of Su Luo's feet. It extended two small paws and grabbed the lower corner of Su Luo's clothing. Its small body trembled and quivered while climbing into her lap. The whole time, Su Luo's body was completely stiff. She stared at this little guy with an extremely dumbfounded expression. At the moment, this little guy's plump and chubby little body was already laying on its back in her lap. Its little belly moved up and down with every breath, eyes still closed as it started to make tiny snoring noises. Its pair of paws still firmly clasped a piece of Su Luo's clothing. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't pry its paws open. This little guy was a little too unself-conscious. Wasn't approaching her out of its own accord already acting a little too familiar? Does it think that she is its mother? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 3 strips of black lines appeared on Su Luo's forehead. Drip, drip, drip. Her cold sweat poured down. Her eyes were fixed on this little guy that trustingly came of its own accord. She meticulously and carefully looked at it up and down. Speaking of which, what kind of species is this little guy? Say, is it a dog? It looks a little like it could be, but it didn't have fur. Say, is it a baby dragon? However, it was born to look like a plump ball with a foolish blank expression that was too adorable. Entirely unlike the image of a divine dragon that would bear fangs and brandish claws too, with a terrible and fierce malevolence. The most important thing is this. That egg just now. How did it roll to here in the first place? Was it caused by man or was it the will of heaven? Also her small wooden house. How did it remain intact when it was in the middle of a roaring tornado? This was simply too unbelievable. In the midst of Su Luo's contemplation, the small wooden house suddenly began to tremble. She was shaken until the sky spun, and the earth went around 3. Her head was woozy and her vision was spinning, making her dizzy. Finally, she felt the entire small wooden house fall straight down. Oh damn it! Su Luo secretly cursed in her heart as she firmly held on to the small wooden house. Next to her ear, the wind whistled loudly. Right now the situation was even more terrifying than being in a falling elevator. It was through great difficulty that Su Luo had once again been reborn. How could she fall and die again in this era? 1. Indulging in flights of fancy, Chinese idiom. To let one's imagination run wild. To have a bee in one's bonnet. Unrealistic utopian fantasy 2. Bare fangs and brandish claws, Chinese idiom. To make threatening gestures 3. Sky spins and the earth goes around, Chinese idiom. Giddy with one's head spinning, figuratively meaning huge changes in the world. Chapter 77. To subdue a foolish, adorable, pampered spirit 4. When the small wooden house fell down, it fortunately by chance smashed down onto the branches of another 1,000-year-old ancient tree. Lush branches continuously resisted the downward pressure of the fall. During the descent, although the small wooden house was thrown about until it shattered into tiny pieces, Su Luo, a step ahead, had already rolled out of it hugging the little guy tightly. Su Luo's movements were very nimble. She tucked the defenseless little guy next to her bosom, used both hands to grab a tree branch, and light as a feather floated past. Her movements were graceful, lithe and agile, because of her ability to quickly dodge. When the shattered pieces of wood from the little wooden house fell down, it was unable to cause her the slightest bit of harm. However, this did not mean she was safe yet. Quite the opposite, there were other dangers that awaited her. Currently, not far from Su Luo's location, there was an extremely bitter battle taking place. One was a creature that looked very similar to the little guy, the divine dragon that Lu Ruohua and company previously shouted about. As for the other one, it could only be the phoenix bird, burning from head to foot in a raging inferno of flames. The two were fighting against each other to the point where it seemed that both sides would suffer from this win-less situation. Dragon. Suddenly a thought flashed through Su Luo's mind. Her brain suddenly light up. She ruefully hit herself in the head. She had suffered untold hardships. 1. To arrive at the Sunset Mountain Range, eliminated countless difficulties, and all for what? It was of course for dragon blood. Since the one that was just fighting was a dragon, then. Su Luo's gaze landed on the charmingly naive little guy who was comfortably asleep in her arms. This guy should also be a dragon, right? That's right. There could be no mistake. This was definitely a dragon. From before, that soccer ball-sized egg was absolutely a dragon egg. While she can't get the divine dragon's blood, but this little divine dragon was currently in her hands. Hey. The corner of Su Luo's mouth brought forth a sinister smile. This was indeed a perversion of searching everywhere, far and wide. Given how easy it was to find, she realized that her luck was so good that it could only be described as defying heaven's will. She never expected that a dragon's egg would just coincidentally be dropped in front of her. Moreover, it also spontaneously hatched. And what's more, it even reflexively volunteered to climb into her lap. Su Luo started to smile with pride. Her slender finger poked the little divine dragon in her arms. The corner of the little dragon's mouth began to froth and bubble as it sleepily wheezes and snored in a sound sleep. It was completely unaware that it was being marked by someone. If the mother dragon knew about Su Luo's thoughts, it really would want to vomit blood. Just when her little dragon, that she had nurtured with great difficulty, was about to hatch, she ran into a phoenix that was seeking revenge. She could do nothing, and had no other choice than to randomly select a tiny place to store her little dragon egg. But how could she have known that the random small wooden house she had selected was actually harboring such a person? Furthermore, by sheer chance, what the person needed most was dragon's blood. If the mother dragon knew of this, it very likely would become insane with anger. What was this called? This was practically called voluntarily delivering her child to the door of a tyrant and begging for it to be oppressed. Su Luo took out a dagger from within her boots, which glittered like frost and snow, radiating deathly cold rays of light. However, right when Su Luo was pondering where she ought to start cutting, the little divine dragon unexpectedly woke up. It opened its misty, watery little eyes, and its little paws started to rub the blurred drowsiness out of them. Its little face was filled with confusion. This stupidly cute expression seemed to be able to enthrall any person with its adorable, bewitching sense of cuteness. Naturally, when she saw it, even Su Luo's iron-hard heart also softened. Suddenly, the adorable little dragon opened its round eyes wide and instantly fixed its gaze onto Su Luo. Su Luo also silently gazed back at it. When it saw Su Luo, the little divine dragon seemed to become very excited. Its little mouth opened, issuing forth a sweet-sounding dragon cry. Wang! The dragon cry rang out next to Su Luo's ear, jolting her forehead with extreme pain and giving her a splitting headache. But also because of the sound of this dragon cry, her plans had been ruined. One suffered untold hardships, Chinese idiom, trials and tribulations, with difficulty, after some effort. Chapter 78. To subdue a foolish, adorable, pampered spirit. 5. The mother dragon and the fire phoenix's fight was at the peak of ferocity for the battle, but it still found the time to turn its head, only to see its treasured little baby was actually laying in the arms of a person from the insignificant human race. Moreover, that human was even wielding a dagger and making motions towards the baby with it. Oh my God! The mother dragon let out an ear-piercing sound that resonated loud and clear. The sound volume blasted straight through the clouds into the sky. The mother dragon thought that it would be best to immediately release a dragon's breath to burn Su Luo to a crisp, until there would almost be nothing left. When the transformation to ashes was complete, the residual would float away light as a feather. However, Su Luo's good luck rested on the dragon hostage she held in her hands, as this placed her in an advantageous position. Therefore, none of the mother dragon's long-range attacks could be used. The mother dragon was afraid that while wounding the rat, it would hit the fragile jade vase. So it refrained from shooting at the rat for fear of breaking vases. 1. Suddenly, Su Luo saw the enormously large body of a divine dragon leaped in her direction. Such an awe-inspiring, dignified, powerful dragon jolted her heart and caused it to throb violently. A startled expression passed through her eyes. It was too late to think clearly. She hugged the adorable little dragon close, turned around, and just ran. This was definitely an unconscious action. Run, run. Run! Su Luo knew that if the mother dragon was to catch up to her, any hope of getting dragon's blood would be dashed. Not only that, her life would cease to exist beneath the flying claws of the violently raging mother dragon. The divine dragon's bursts of dragon roar shocked Su Luo, making her blood rush forth. The power of the dragon roar was deafening, like a magnificent army with thousands of men and horses, too, surging forward. While the divine dragon was chasing after Su Luo to kill her, the fire phoenix behind was also chasing after the divine dragon. It was also because of the fire phoenix's interference that Su Luo had a slight chance to escape. It appeared like a blazing path that pierced the vast sky. 10,000 thunderclaps started to echo across the sky. Its power to destroy also contained an endless murderous intent. Su Luo, while running, also took the time to look back. She only saw the dragon's malevolently cruel and vengeful expression, the light of bloodlust shining out from the dragon's eyes. The soccer ball-sized scales glittered like snow and frost, as if each piece contained an inexhaustible strength. Damn it! Cursed Su Luo. Her expression changed slightly when she saw the distance between the divine dragon and herself shrinking. The divine dragon had long ago become enraged. If she was captured by it, then her end would absolutely be quite tragic. Su Luo accelerated her pace. Her footsteps seemed to give birth to the wind. With powerful jumps, she rushed forward without looking back. Su Luo's heart was very agitated. With her current speed, she was sure that halfway down the road, the dragon will overtake her. How can she escape from it? The divine dragon chased her until she had to go up to heaven or down to Hades. 3. Fleeing and still couldn't escape. In the meanwhile, the little guy in her arms was also restless. It apparently felt that they were playing a game. It stretched out its round, plump head and joined with its mother dragon in issuing dragon roars up here, down there. 4. Su Luo was frustrated to death. She half threatened and half menacingly patted its head. Do not call out. The adorable little dragon did not seem to understand the meaning of Su Luo's words. Its round, circular eyes were full of confusion. However, After seeing Su Luo's cruel and sinister expression, it weakly withdrew its neck and silently contracted its little head back into Su Luo's arm. However, after a short while, the little dragon reverted to its old ways. The little head once again came out to explore. "You're not allowed to yell, go back," Su Lu said while tapping its head. The little dragon once again did what it was told, and very obediently pulled back into Su Luo's arms. As a result, every time the little dragon would spring out, Su Luo would flick it back in. It would come out to explore, and then once again be bounced back in. Due to this back and forth, the adorable little dragon was under the impression that Su Luo was playing a game with it. Ha ha ha, it laughingly chortled while playing along happily. Later on, Su Luo was too lazy to poke the little dragon, so it became upset. The little dragon started to wail a woo-a-woo loudly. An expression of being wronged appeared on its little face. Its eyes were gleaming with tears. The 3 black lines on Su Luo's forehead once again appeared. All she wanted was a little dragon's blood. It should have been easy, right? In front she had an adorable little dragon stirring up trouble. Behind she had a large divine dragon pursuing closely and unwilling to let go. The divine dragon's speed was like lightning. Wherever it goes, all the grass and trees would fall to both sides, as if to open a path. 1. Refrain from shooting at the rat for fear of breaking vases. Idiom: to not act against an evil so as to prevent harm to innocents. 2. Magnificent army with thousands of men and horses. Idiom: impressive display of manpower. All the king's horses and all the king's men. 3. Go up to heaven or down to Hades. Idiom: whichever way, I don't care. To decide to go ahead without foreboding. Chapter 79. To subdue a foolish, adorable, pampered spirit. 6. The rumbling echoes of tumbling rocks seemed to grow, and the trees that were blocking the path were immediately transformed into ashes by Dragon's breath. After a long chase, it was still unable to catch up. The divine dragon was so infuriated that both its eyes were red with anger. However, it was still afraid of injuring the little divine dragon, so it won't dare to fire off a dragon's breath. The large divine dragon's eyes continued to burn with flames of fury. The huge dragon tail resembled a chain of thickly linked iron swinging dangerously around. In one spot it had swept. It snapped all the forest trees within 10 meters of its body. Flying leaves swirled in the air as a giant cloud of dust rose. Although Su Luo was not swept up by the dragon tail, she was hit by flying fragments of wood. A piece of broken wood ruthlessly knocked against her back. When it did, Su Luo felt as if her back was about to split wide open. She felt as if a huge boulder had been pressing down on her chest, so heavily that made it nearly impossible for her to breathe. She felt that the chi and blood in her entire body rolled over in waves. A sweet coppery taste materialized in her throat. Unable to keep it in, she sprayed out a stream of blood. Phew, the soles of Su Luo's feet swayed, almost unable to stand. Just at this time, a sense of an impending crisis rushed through her mind. This was caused by the divine dragon behind her, who was unexpectedly preparing to unleash Dragon's breath. An awe-inspiring radiance streaked by, and the brilliant rays were like sharp swords launched toward Su Luo. Su Luo's complexion had immediately undergone a major change. She spared no effort. 1. In rushing towards the tilting thorns, her speed was so quick that only an incomplete shadow was left behind. That slash of intense radiance was like the tip of a double-edged sword that directly turned the trees within 100 meters ahead of it into ashes. Even the ground was completely split open, leaving a terrifying large fissure in the earth. The soil and mud were also turned into fine dust. Su Luo dangerously avoided this killing move, yet an icy chill emerged from her heart, and her forehead was instantly covered in cold sweat. She was almost at the end of her rope, and was barely hanging in by a thread. But fortunately, at this time the fire phoenix had already caught up with the divine dragon. Consequently, these two divine beasts' blood feud resumed. This provided Su Luo with a little opportunity that she could take advantage of. If the divine dragon did not fear of trouble in the rear, too, Su Luo knew she simply would not have been its opponent. Very likely she would have already been slashed to death by the divine dragon's claws, without being able to run for more than several hundred meters. However, in the recent past, Su Luo, seemed to be cared for by the goddess of fortune. Against all expectations, on the back heels of this divine dragon, the fire phoenix followed up and continued its battle with the dragon. Moreover, this fire phoenix had narrow-mindedly taken advantage of its difficulties. As a result, the divine dragon had no other alternative than to face Su Luo with hateful regret while gnashing its teeth. Whenever the divine dragon was about to kill off Su Luo, the fire phoenix that had been following close behind would come out and cause a disturbance. This kind of situation repeated itself again and again, enraging the divine dragon until it nearly spat out blood. But now, even Su Luo also had a kind of urge to spit out blood. It's over. When Su Luo saw the barren cliffs and the precipitous rock faces ahead, she immediately wanted to start to cry, but lacked the tears to begin. At this time, all three directions moving forward were blocked by an overhanging cliff, and behind her the mother dragon pursued feverishly, unwilling to let go. Now she basically had nowhere to escape. What to do? Could it be that her hands were practically tied and set to be captured? Out of the question. Even if she was to return the adorable little dragon now, the divine dragon will absolutely not let her get away. At present she still had not arrived at the dead-end road, so surely there was still another chance to save herself. Sure enough, heaven never barred one's way. Su Luo's sharp eyes saw a perfectly straight dark green creeper vine hanging down the cliff. Su Luo gave it a few tugs and found that this rope-like creeper vine was apparently frequently used by people before her. She need not worry about the firmness aspect of the vine. It seems as if the heavens really don't want me to die. Su Luo's heart immediately rejoiced. She tucked the adorable little dragon into her bosom. Afterwards she used her hands to nimbly grab the creeper vine. She used both her hands and feet to rapidly climb up the tall overhanging cliff. It took her less than a quarter of the hour to reach the top. On top of the cliff was a flat plain covered by a meadow. A gentle breeze passed by and rustled a tidy area of the field into a rising and falling motion, like a jade-green wave that rippled. This sight gave her the sensation of an untroubled heart, pleased spirit. 6. Standing on top of the precipice and gazing into the distance, Su Luo could clearly see the feverish fight between the divine dragon and the fire phoenix not far away. It was as if they had claimed an area of heaven and earth for themselves. Fiery ocean patches spread endlessly, with soaring flames boiling over like lava. Chapter 80. To subdue a foolish, adorable, pampered spirit. 7. Good, very good, extremely good. If she didn't take advantage of this fortunate timing, she wouldn't get another chance. Su Luo's heart rejoiced. Using one hand, she brought out the adorable little dragon from within her embrace, while the other hand searched within her bosom for the jade box that she had prepared. The celestial spirit water she stole from Su Manor, and the spatial grass she received from Nangong Luyan, were both stored in the jade box. The jade box had the ability to keep things fresh that resembled refrigeration. Even if the spatial grass was stored for a few decades, when it's taken out later, it would be as tender and fresh as if it had just been picked. However, at this moment, a look of astonishment flashed through Su Luo's eyes. Where was the jade box? Where was her jade box? Su Luo's face immediately became puzzled and unconvinced. She remembered very clearly that when she was alone in the small wooden house before, she had personally taken out the jade box to check. How could it have disappeared? Did she lose it when she fell down the ancient tree? Not possible. She clearly remembered the jade box was in her arms when she tucked the adorable little dragon in there too. How could it have suddenly disappeared between that time and now? Could it be that she had dropped it on top of the overhanging cliff? Su Luo looked down and began to search everywhere from left to right and in all directions. Ultimately, she ended up laying on the ground and rummaging through the soil, but she still could not find a trace of the jade box. This could truly be called having picked up a sesame seed while losing a watermelon. Su Luo just wanted to cry but lacked the tears. Undoubtedly the dragon's blood is right in front of her, but the spatial grass and the celestial spirit water had actually disappeared. What could be worse? While Su Luo was in the midst of dismay and going around in circles, the adorable little dragon from the beginning had been looking up at Su Luo with a pair of eyes which contained a bewildered and foolishly stupid expression. Its thin and delicate little paws grabbed onto Su Luo's trouser leg, and a pair of small, short legs followed Su Luo in continuously circling around. Furthermore, it seemed as if it was chewing something in its mouth. A flash of insight appeared in Su Luo's mind. She suddenly remembered the scene of the adorable little dragon eating the eggshells from before. She couldn't be that unlucky, right? A kind of ominous premonition emerged from within Su Luo's heart. She picked up the adorable little dragon, and with slender fingers pried open its tiny dragon mouth. Following a close examination, 3 lines of bursting veins formed on Su Luo's forehead. For a split second, she even had the desire to strangle the adorable little dragon. What did she see? She actually found pieces of the jade box in the adorable little dragon's mouth that had yet to be swallowed. She absolutely could not have mistaken that bright green characteristic of the jade. This little thing. It had actually ate the small jade box. Su Luo had a strong urge to flip the little dragon on its stomach in her lap and spank its butt. After a while of being mad at herself, Su Luo unhappily fixed her gaze on the adorable little dragon, as if attempting to kill it with her meaningful glare. However, the adorable little dragon seemed to be completely unaware of her glare. Instead, its head weaved to and fro. Its sleepy eyes were drowsy from dozing off. The corner of its mouth was even splitting out tiny blue bubbles. Su Luo was so infuriated that with a swish, she took out her personal dagger. She threateningly gestured everywhere along the small body of the adorable little dragon with the dagger, and very fiercely said, "Celestial spirit water and the spatial grass were swallowed, but it shouldn't have been digested yet, right?" The adorable little dragon opened its misty eyes. Its face had a sluggish look of having just woken up. She only saw its little mouth move closer, and then afterwards a crisp chomp sound rang out. Su Luo was once again dumbfounded. She rigidly fixed her eyes on the dagger handle used for self-protection, and once again had a feeling of being driven irascibly mad. Damn it! Nangong Luyan had said this dagger was made from top-grade iron, and also bragged about how exceptionally sharp it was. Unexpectedly, it had become lunch for this little guy who in one bite chewed it apart. The adorable little dragon was munching away, as if eating something very delicious like a cookie, with crisp crunching noises that gave off a sweet and flavorful impression. Su Luo was about to hit her forehead again. She felt that if she was to continue to stay together with the adorable little dragon, either she will be driven mad by this silly little dragon, or she will cut this silly little dragon into pieces. These were the only 2 possible roads she could take. Chapter 81. To subdue a foolish, adorable, pampered spirit. 8. Just what had she walked away with? Originally she thought it was a treasure from the heavens, but she never would have expected that she had actually carried back a tiny demon. Before she believed that she was the goddess of fortune reincarnated as a mortal, but now she felt that she was a villain that had killed the goddess's father and led to her decline. How did it end up like this? Spatial grass and celestial spirit water were gone. Doesn't this mean that she will never be able to open her space? The adorable little dragon apparently could detect Su Luo's anxiety, and it tilted its tiny head. Su Luo worriedly paced around with the dragon's swaying little legs following closely behind. It wobbled and shook while it fumbled after her from here to there. If strangers were to see this scene, they might be unsure whether to laugh or cry. In the end, Su Luo crouched down, picked up the silly little dragon, looked it in the eye, and fiercely asked, "Little guy, you tell me, should I stew you, or roast you, or stir-fry you?" The silly little dragon was completely unaware it was about to be food. It tilted its head, and a pair of large, limpid, amber eyes foolishly watched Su Luo with a deep sense of puzzlement. "Don't know how to speak, right? Then I'll just take it as you agreeing with whatever I choose?" Su Luo smiled while fish lay surveying it, holding her broken dagger, and gestured over its little paws. As her mind became clear, she began to realize something. Since Nangong Luyan had obtained a blade of spatial grass, it should be the case that there was a second one. As for the celestial spirit water, since the Su family had been able to obtain it before, then there was sure to be more in this world. As long as she spent some time searching, then she definitely will find it. As for this dragon's blood, if not for a coincidence by chance, it would have been even harder to come by. What's more, this was actually divine dragon's blood, and much better when compared to the whatever inferior blood that came from the armored-backed dragon. However, looking at the silly little dragon in front of her, Su Luo had her worries. This little thing, that had just hatched, was so thin and feeble with delicate arms and legs. How could she take action? She had no desire to kill it. She only wanted to take a little blood from it. But she was worried that with one strike of her dagger, would the adorable little dragon die. Just when Su Luo was indecisively wavering, suddenly the adorable little dragon leaned closer to her bosom. With eyes closed, it reflexively sniffed around in her embrace like a piglet seeking milk to drink. Su Luo immediately became speechless. With one grab, she pulled out the little guy and unhappily scowled. "I'm definitely not your dragon mother, so don't even think about poking around." The silly little dragon opened its misty eyes, and it stupidly looked at Su Luo. Suddenly she only saw it opening its little mouth. A sharp and clear dragon's cry was uttered like a soft whistle. Su Luo was immediately caught off guard, and her eardrums were in extreme pain from the shock. Her chi and blood rolled over into the pit of her stomach. She almost spitted out another mouthful of blood again. However, without waiting for Su Luo's reaction, the silly little dragon immediately opened its mouth and bit Su Luo's wrist. Ah! A burst of acute pain almost made Su Luo jump up. Although it had just hatched, dragon seeds are still dragon species, gifted and super strong. Its baby teeth were sharp, hard and strong. Su Luo's blood madly rushed forth from the bite wound on her wrist. She discovered that if she continued to stay with the silly little dragon, she sooner or later would be spitting out blood. If she wasn't busy being infuriated to the point of spitting blood, then she would be jolted by its roars to spit blood, or just bleeding from its bite. Su Luo scowled at the silly little dragon, but it employed both of its limpid, water-clogged eyes and returned her gaze with a woebegone, pity-me expression. Moreover, both of its paws were clenched into tiny fists under its chin in an irresistibly cute posture. Looking at the pitiful appearance of the silly little dragon, Su Luo's breath was trapped in her lungs and was unable to explode out. Just at this moment, suddenly a band of intense, golden radiance enveloped the silly little dragon. She merely saw a small round lump of blood flew out of the silly little dragon's mouth. This blood had Su Luo's blood within it, and also contained the little foolish dragon's own blood. She only saw that ball of blood unexpectedly take the form of a strange pattern of symbols. This design emitted an intensely dense and black air of mystery. Su Luo was dumbfounded as she watched this scene. She simply was unable to react. This really is. Previously, she had flipped through all the books on this continent's history and general knowledge, therefore a faint speculation appeared in her mind. Chapter 82. You have been abandoned. 1. She saw that ball of blood quickly split in two. Half flew into Su Luo's body. The other half flew into the adorable little dragon's body. While Su Luo was still standing there astonished, a burst of pain suddenly penetrated through her brain. Afterwards, an enormous amount of knowledge immediately rushed into her head like a tide. The adorable little dragon had actually formed a contract with her. Moreover, it was a contract between equals, not one of subjugation. Adorable little dragon, what are you called? Su Luo could sense a thread of spiritual connection with the adorable little dragon, as if she can conduct a telepathic exchange with it. Mama. The young dragon's words weren't clear. Mama? What kind of name it that? Forget it, I'll just call you Meng Meng One from now on, okay? Su Luo's slender figures rubbed the round and chubby head of the adorable little dragon. Ha ha! The adorable little dragon seemed to be overjoyed. It laughed until its eyes became narrow lines. Without using any power, she had managed to subdue a little divine dragon. This gave Su Luo a feeling of being blessed, akin to the sensation of pies magically falling from the sky. Anyways, it was obvious that the goddess of fortune once again favored her. Suddenly, the scene in front of her eyes blurred. Su Luo dodged, but she had already entered a completely unfamiliar place. Su Luo carried the adorable little dragon and inquisitively looked around. Don't tell me, could it be that this was her space? But this space was really small, and only about 10 square meters in size. Moreover, it only had a small fountain-like spirit spring, and there was nothing else? Also, what made Su Luo even more depressed was that the adorable little dragon's body can enter. But as for her, only her spirit can enter. Her spirit entered the space, but her body was still outside. This made her somewhat depressed. It proved that her space was different from the legendary rumored space in one's body. The space spoken of in legendary rumors stated that the owner can enter with their physical body. This way, when in danger, the person at any time can avoid harm by entering their space. This indeed was the best treasure to bypass being killed for property, while on a journey away from home. The reason why Su Luo dared to kidnap the adorable little dragon was largely in part due to her certainty that when the moment comes, she would have her space. When the divine dragon that chased and wanted to kill her arrived, she could hide in her space, and thus her safety would be guaranteed. However, looking at the current situation, she would have to take her time making a decision too. Su Luo quietly examined this difficult-to-come-by space. At this moment, the adorable little dragon had already taken some steps with its little short legs. Its entire body was on its stomach by the side of the spirit spring, with its little head leaning in to enthusiastically drink the spring water. The mouth of the spring was merely the size of a wooden barrel, and the spring water was so clear that you could see the bottom. It also issued a faint but sweet fragrance. Su Luo drank a mouthful from the spirit spring, and immediately felt as if the filth in her entire body had washed away, leaving nothing behind. Her entire body was relaxed and invigorated. Her bright expression was full of crisp vital energy. But this was not right. Su Luo suddenly realized that this spirit spring compared to the celestial spirit water she stole from the Su Manor was exactly the same. She previously had tasted a tiny bit of the celestial spirit water, so now with just one drink she could determine it. Su Lu immediately felt as if a stone was lodged in her throat, making her speechless. Before, in order to get that celestial spirit water, she had suffered untold hardships to steal it. She had been chased after by that conveniently cheap old father, which caused her to run around the entire manor. However, she never expected that after opening her space, the celestial spirit water available did not amount to mere bottles, but instead contained an entire fountain of spirit spring. Wasn't the goddess of fortune smiled down upon her too much? There was no way she could return the favor. While Su Luo was in the midst of her narcissistic thoughts, suddenly she had a very bad premonition. She became aware of a scathing murderous aura that was closing in from afar. She exited her space and tilted her head up to look. That divine dragon who was pursuing closely without letting go had arrived. Now it sprayed a mouthful of dragon's breath directly towards her. Su Luo was so scared that her complexion quickly changed. She turned and just ran, similar to a cunning rabbit running at lightning speed. 1 Meng Meng, Chinese pinyin for the character adorable. She named the dragon adorable. 2. To take her time making a decision. Idiom. To consider at length. Chapter 83. You have been abandoned, too. Maybe it was due to drinking the celestial spirit water, but Su Luo suddenly that felt her whole body had become light and graceful. She felt as lithe as a swallow, and her speed compared to before was faster by a large margin. Previously she was shaken until she spat out blood. She had run until utter exhaustion, but under a mouthful of spirit spring, these symptoms had now all disappeared. Run. Su Luo ran to the other side, grabbed the creeper vine and jumped off to swung all the way to the other side of the cliff. The divine dragon was tightly pursuing behind her, unwilling to let go. It breathed out a dragon's breath towards her. Half of the cliff suddenly collapsed. Numerous rocks began to rain onto Su Luo. Su Luo fell like a flexible flood dragon, jumping right and left as she continued to dodge. When the chase got extremely close for comfort, Su Luo suddenly had a flash of insight that made her firmly slapped herself in the head. Her space had been opened already, so the adorable little dragon's blood held no more use for her. She can just return the adorable little dragon. How could she have been so stupid? How could she not have thought of this earlier? Su Luo's thoughts were well developed, but reality was very different. When she had come out, the adorable little dragon had been thrown into her space. So currently, Su Luo could clearly see the adorable little dragon with its tiny but raised, and its whole body lying in front of the fountain. It had its face in the spirit spring glup, glup, drinking it down. Slowly, the places where the spirit spring was located began to disappear. Inside Su Luo, her mind and heart were in great pain. She hastily summoned the adorable little dragon in her mind. Little Meng Meng, good boy, nice boy, quickly come out now. The adorable little dragon continued to drink. Your home's master is about to be beaten up by your mom. Quickly come out. Su Luo dodged left and right, while she continued to call anxiously. The adorable little dragon clutched the earth at the side of the spirit spring with its two small paws, dipped its head, and continued to drink. On Su Luo's head, 3 lines of veins burst out. This disobedient little guy, when she escaped this, he'll see how she'll spank his little ass. On this road, Su Luo was being chased by the divine dragon while constantly zigzagging and scurrying around in all directions. Finally, even she did not know where she had ended up. Suddenly, Su Luo sensed that there were people in front, and they were even people she was familiar with. Su Luo's eyes flashed with a secretive and evil look. Then, with no guilt at all, she guided the divine dragon in their direction, leading the trouble to the east too. This was a trick Su Luo was very skilled at. Soon, Su Luo had gotten so close that she could see a 5-person group. The group was not just any random group. It was none other than Lu Ruohua's group. When Lu Ruohua turned her head to see Su Luo's whole body's battered and exhausted appearance, obviously she looked very happy. She looked up, down and all over Su Luo. At last with an unbridled laugh she grinned. Su Luo, so it was you? We were only separated for so long. Yet how did you become this embarrassingly disheveled? Su Luo absent-mindedly looked over at her. She blandly responded with one sentence. And you're not unkempt? Currently, Lu Ruohua's clothing was filthy and tattered from head to toe. Her face was covered in scars from being scratched by tree branches, bloody all over. She was a complete mess. Her face was probably injured by the tornado from before. Lu Weiming looked at Su Luo, his eyes flashed with a complex look. He laughed with enthusiasm. Miss Su? How come His Highness Prince Jean is not with you? Su Luo let out a sigh. His Highness Prince Jean had some business and left for a while. He will be back soon. Do you have some business that need him? When she heard this, Lu Ruohua let out a huge maniacal mocking laugh. She pointed at Su Luo and said, You little credit-claiming whore. You think we don't know? His Highness Prince Jean had already left chasing after the Jade Lake's ferry. He abandoned you, yet you still don't understand? You're just His Highness Prince Jin's plaything, a pawn that he can always discard at any time. 1 Flood Dragon. Legendary dragon with the abilities to control rain and floods too. Leading the trouble to the east. Idiom. Meaning redirecting the trouble onto someone else. Chapter 84. You have been abandoned 3. What nonsense are you saying? Su Luo feigned anger and glared at her with eyes full of hatred. What I said was nonsense. Ha ha ha, I'm laughing to death. I'm really dying of laughter. Lu Ruohua laughed until tears came out. In her heart, her crazy envy of Su Luo completely dispersed into haze, due to Su Luo having been discarded. Only Lu Ruohua's taunting laugh could be heard. She then sneered. How about you tell me? Didn't His Highness Prince Jean go looking for the Jade Lake's ferry? Su Luo smiled coldly. Lu Ruohua's guess wasn't wrong. Didn't Nangong Luyan really leave to go look for the Jade Lake's ferry? He deserted her, left her in the small wooden house. Wasn't it precisely because he wanted to look for the Jade Lake's ferry? Seeing the complicated mood on Su Luo's face, Lu Ruohua was happy to the extreme. She covered her belly while laughing heartily. She was laughing so hard that she could barely breathe. Su Luo, Su Luo. Here I was under the impression that you had a lot of skills. After all, His Highness Prince Jean was so loving towards you. You probably didn't expect that you being favored would last for a mere 2 days. Ha ha, ha. Su Luo only watched her laugh quietly, a secretive light appearing in her eyes. However, it wasn't possible to see any changes on her face, as it remained inscrutable. Lu Ruohua had enough of laughing, turned towards Lu Weiming and said, "The wild serpent's inner core is still on her body. Shouldn't we take it back?" Lu Weiming frowned slightly, a trace of hesitance flickering across his eyes. After a while he finally said, "Didn't she already swallow it?" Lu Ruohua's face showed contempt for his idiocy, while her eyes glared at Lu Weiming. "Are you stupid? How can the inner core of the wild serpent be so easily digested? Maybe it's still in her digestive tract undamaged and intact. Being uncertain, why not just cut open her belly, and then we'll know for sure, right?" Lu Weiming was somewhat hesitant. After all, previously His Highness Prince Jin had displayed a very caring manner towards Su Luo. Lu Ruohua let out a sneering laugh. "Don't you see? His Highness Prince Jin has already abandoned her. Otherwise, why would His Highness Prince Jin chase after the Jade Lakes Fairy? Could it be that you think this slut can even be compared to the Jade Lakes Fairy? If you were asked to choose, would you choose the precious, gloriously flowery fairy, or this good-for-nothing? Don't tell me you feel that His Highness Prince Jin's vision can't be compared to yours?" Lu Ruohua's words coaxed at every step, penetrating deeply through each layer of resistance. Lu Weiming's expression had a frightful hidden depth. It issued a nebulous, deadly threatening air. He was aware that Lu Ruohua wanted to avenge a personal grudge, so she was trying to bewitch him, but he was still unable to refuse. The inner core of the wild serpent was indeed very important to him. As long as he could get the inner core, he would have the opportunity to become the personal disciple of Grandmaster Lan Hai. In that case, his cultivation road in the future would have propitious wind throughout the journey, as compared to harsh challenges one after another. A trace of a smile slowly emerged on Lu Weiming's face. It was an icy cold and extremely dangerous smile. The dagger he hid in his sleeves suddenly moved. A trace of a sneer flashed through Su Luo's heart. "A bunch of idiots. What are you guys thinking of doing?" Su Luo deliberately shouted out loudly and anxiously. "If His Highness Prince Jin found out that you guys killed me, then he will never let you guys go. Bragging like you have a tiger's pelt, and actually hoisting it as a banner." Lu Ruohua measured her with a cold and threatening laugh. "His Highness Prince Jin, first, let's not even talk about whether or not His Highness Prince Jin would seek revenge on your behalf. Granted, even if he wanted to avenge you, he won't find you. Here in the Sunset Mountain Range, it's full of magical beasts. After the magical beasts have gnawed on your bones, I don't know if His Highness Prince Jin will even recognize that chunk of bones is you, Su Luo." "You guys," Su Luo's words had yet to be completed, when she felt a sinister human shadow already standing behind her back. The deeply cold handle of the dagger was headed towards her throat. Assassin! She would never have thought that Lu Weiming was like her, someone proficient in assassin techniques. A very dangerous and icy cold smile appeared on Su Luo's face. "One propitious wind throughout the journey, idiom. Plain sailing, to go smoothly, have a nice trip." Chapter 85. The Lovable, Adorable Little Dragon 1. Lu Weiming could only watch as Su Luo's feet slid away, her entire body slipping from his hand like a mudfish. Before he could react, her figure was already 10 meters away. Lu Weiming's dagger promptly met with empty air. A threat of surprise flashed through his eyes. He could feel that Su Luo's body did not contain a shred of spiritual power. This was sufficient to illustrate that she was simply an ordinary person that could not be more common and a waste of space. On the other hand, he himself was already a third-ranked mage. However, his sneak attack actually did not succeed. This gave him a strong feeling of having been thwarted. The corner of Su Luo's mouth evoked a smile that was nearly impossible to catch sight of. She smiled coldly. With her feet not even touching the ground, Su Luo turned her body and just ran. She could feel that the battle between the Divine Dragon and the Fire Phoenix was over. Now the Divine Dragon is free to chase after her again in order to kill her. "If you have the ability, then don't run." Lu Ruohua shouted, then immediately gave chase. "If you have the ability, then don't chase." Su Luo turned her head around and made a face at Lu Ruohua, telling her not to run. Do they think that she was an idiot? A strong killing intent flashed through Lu Weiming's eyes. If a moment ago he had not made a move, then the matter would be over. Since he had already attempted an attack, he must now complete the task and eliminate all evidence. Otherwise, if Su Luo was to make sinister accusations in front of His Highness Prince Jin later on, their lives would be forfeit. Even though His Highness Prince Jin had tossed her aside and left, God knows when the temperamental Prince Jin would change his mind and go look for her again? At this moment, Lu Weiming's eyes held a sinister bloodlust, overflowing with killing intent. The others watched as he ran so fast he seemed to be flying, tightly nipping at Su Luo's heels. He followed her closely, not giving her a chance to escape. Behind him, those 4 people without exception also chased after Su Luo to chip away at the task without abandoning it too. Even if they were to die, they must behead her with their own blades. The distance between the two parties becomes shorter by the second as the chasing party drew closer with each step. Closer and closer. Hey, something is wrong, Lu Weiming suddenly frowned. He sensed a dangerous atmosphere coming from behind them. He turned his head to look, and his complexion immediately became pale white as paper. Both of his legs went limp, making it nearly impossible for him to stand. Seeing him like this, everyone turned their heads around to look. Heavens, oh heavens. Is that a snake-type beast? You stupid airhead, thinking that it's a type of snake beast. That's a dragon. A divine dragon. Once he said those words, everyone present stopped talking and were as silent as the dead. A divine dragon that legend said could destroy a city with a stomp of its feet. The venerable divine dragon. It was simply too frightening. Even more terrifying was the fact that the divine dragon, behind them, was tenaciously chasing after them. Its eyes were full of a violent hatred and enmity, as if they had stolen its child. But what caused the venerable divine dragon to even feel that they were worth chasing, let alone chasing them with intent to kill? At this moment they simply did not have time to think. Their brains just weren't functioning. They only knew to step forward and run. Each ran as fast as they possibly could. If one of them could run past their companions, then that person would have a better chance of surviving. At this time, everyone was incomparably disheveled and unkempt. Running in front of them was Su Luo, who was smiling with sinister treachery. Since Lu Weiming and the divine dragon both wanted to kill her, in that case, let them first massacre each other. After the winner has been decided, the survivor could then seek her to battle it out. Leading the trouble to the east. 3. Borrowing someone else's knife to kill another. These were tricks that Su Luo was most skilled at. In any case, Lu Weiming and companions had sinister and very savage intentions. Regarding this matter, she didn't feel even a tiny bit of guilt. Poor Lu Weiming, and his companions who still didn't know that this divine dragon had been lured here. If they only knew that as long as they ran separate from Su Luo, they would escape being chased by the menacing divine dragon. However, people in times of danger will inevitably only have one thought. Must firmly hold on to the target ahead and never let go. As a result, this doomed them to a tragic play. In contrast, Su Luo was very perceptive of human nature. She was certain that Lu Weiming and companions will make a move against her. Su Luo was also confident that they weren't aware that she had lured the divine dragon here. She was even more certain that when Lu Weiming and companions tried to escape the divine dragon, they would follow right behind her and become her protective shield. 1. The author used 3 zhang. 1 zhang equals 10 Chinese foot chi or 3 meters. 2. Chip away at the task without abandoning it. To chisel away at sth. To persevere. Unflagging efforts. 3. Leading the trouble to the east. Idiom. Meaning redirecting the trouble onto someone else. Chapter 86. The lovable, adorable, little dragon 2. When it came to astute schemes or sophisticated shrewdness, Su Luo would absolutely not lose to anyone. Poof! The divine dragon sprayed out a mouthful of dragon's breath. Dense black as ink fumes enveloped the few people running at the rear, and covered them in a round sphere. In the divine dragon's eyes, these insignificant humans running together with Su Luo were her comrades, and they all deserved to die. She was afraid that by killing Su Luo she would hurt the little dragon. But in regards to these tiny ants, she had no such misgivings. Consequently, She did not control her dragon's breath. A desperate cry came from the group of people that had fallen behind. It was uttered by a person from Lu Weiming's team. This youngster had a huge crush on Lu Ruohua. Thus he was very amenable to her. However, at the most critical moment when the dragon's breath arrived, he gave Lu Ruohua a helping push, whereas Lu Ruohua had simultaneously pushed him towards the back. She took this opportunity to escape. This youngster's face was full of despair, as he got caught up within the dragon's breath. He watched with an incredulous face as Lu Ruohua's back became ever more distant. His eyes were full of surprise. He would never have thought that he, who gave Lu Ruohua a helping hand, would have been pushed back by such an opportunistic Lu Ruohua. Even as he died, he still couldn't understand, why did she do it? This was just human nature. Selfish and cold-blooded, forgetful of favors and violators of justice. 1. That bite the hands that feed them. This originally was a team of 6 people. However, in the beginning, a person had died because of the wild serpent. Now another had been killed by the divine dragon. So now there were only 4 people left in the team. The captain Lu Weiming, Lu Ruohua, Li Wan, and another youngster. The divine dragon kept getting closer, as if it was almost within a hand's reach. Another tragic cry sounded out. It was that of yet another youngster being consumed by the divine dragon's wrath in one mouthful, leaving not even a scrap behind. Su Luo was flying and running at lightning speed, but even she was unable to keep her heart from trembling. As she turned to see each and every one of the human meat shields behind her about to be swallowed, she could only dread when it would be her turn. Let's split up and run. Otherwise we'll all die. Lu Weiming was worthy of being named captain. For once he calmed down, he very quickly found the only solution. There was only one divine dragon. So as long as everyone scattered in all 4 directions, then at least 3 of the people could have a chance of escape. Lu Weiming sent Su Luo a quick glare full of hatred. He knew Su Luo must die within Sunset Mountain range. If she was to walk out alive, heaven knows how His Highness Prince Jin will deal with them once he learned the news that they had wanted to kill her. Even if they died, they wouldn't want His Highness Prince Jin as an enemy. Therefore the best way was to get someone else to do his dirty work. He was going to borrow the might of the divine dragon to eradicate Su Luo. Having thought about this point, Lu Weiming, Lu Ruohua, and Li Wan exchanged glances. He made a hand gesture. Consequently, all 3 darted toward 3 different directions. She had no choice but to say Lu Weiming's method was truly correct. He had succeeded by a lucky stroke, and saved his own life, and maybe even the lives of Lu Ruohua and Li Wan. Watching as those 3 people scattered, Su Luo's heart had a sense of loss. Alas, the human-shaped meat shields were gone. Now her only hope was placed on the body of the adorable little dragon. The divine dragon gave chase, and was getting closer and closer. Finally it cornered Su Luo at the base of an overhanging cliff. 3 sides were sheer cliffs, and precipitous walls of rock. There were absolutely no routes of escape. Su Luo raised both of her hands, turned around. Her face had a very flattering smile. Hey, a venerable divine dragon, are you tired? Would you like to rest a bit? The divine dragon's malevolently fierce face flashed. An unsympathetic and ice-cold pair of eyes had brought the atmosphere to a sub-zero temperature. It was fixated on Su Luo, as if watching a dead person. It looked everywhere around Su Luo's body, but was surprised when she couldn't find her little treasured baby. In a short while she became furious. Do not. Su Luo was so anxious that she was sweating. 1. Forgetful of favors and violate justice. Idiom. Ingratitude to a friend. To kick a benefactor in the teeth. Chapter 87. The lovable, adorable little dragon 3. She continuously called out to the adorable little dragon with her mind. She shouted mentally until her brain almost cramped up. However, the adorable little dragon continued to lie firmly on its belly beside the spirit spring. Its little face looked up, showing a pair of large winsome eyes with crocodile tears flowing down its face. It gave Su Luo a pitiful and wretched expression, as if she had caused it to feel aggrieved. Within the space, Su Luo's spirit form glared at the little dragon with a fierce expression. If you don't come out now, your mother dragon will kill me with one spray of dragon's breath. At that time you will also die. Let's play this game together. She could not understand. Clearly on the other side was its birth mother. But the little dragon incorrectly kept looking at her, and would not leave the space. Could it be that its own family was not as appealing as someone else's family? No wonder some kids, for whom exotic delicacies were the norm in their own family homes, preferred to eat ordinary vegetables dishes from other families. The adorable little dragon continued to use those pitiful eyes to look at Su Luo. Su Luo faked a fierce appearance and single-handedly picked up the adorable little dragon, preparing to return it. But both of the adorable little dragon's paws had a death grip on the edge of the spirit spring and refused to let go. Crocodile tears were falling from its eyes, as if to say that Su Luo was a human trafficker who kidnapped and sold children. Su Luo propped up her head with one hand. Whose family did this spoiled child really belong to? Please come and quickly carry it home, because she couldn't afford to raise it. She merely want to return the little dragon to its original owner. So what was so wrong with that? The little dragon was making it seem as if she was sending it to the execution block. Finally, Su Luo was left without any other option. If the little dragon didn't show its face now, the divine dragon will definitely kill her with a mouthful of dragon's breath. As a result, Su Luo cajoled the little dragon using a gentle tone and displayed a friendly appearance. She clenched her teeth, put on a warm, tender smile and said, "How about I fill a large bucket with the spirit spring, and you can take it home with you?" The adorable little dragon shook its head. That wouldn't be nearly enough. Su Luo was frustrated, but she once again put on a coaxing smile and said, "Then how about? Let's first go greet your mother dragon and politely ask about her health, okay? After all, she has not seen you since you hatched." The adorable little dragon shook its head. It was certain it would be carried away. Su Luo only felt the space between her eyebrows burst with aggravation. Finally, she gave a secretive calculating smile and quickly picked up the adorable little dragon. "You think I won't be able to pick you up? Harumph humph." It came to Su Luo that within her space, she was the boss. When the adorable little dragon was lifted out of her space and appeared in her arms, the divine dragon had been in the midst of brewing a second dragon's breath. "Your Eminence, hurry and take it back." Su Luo cupped the adorable little dragon with both hands and hastily rushed forward to give it back. She placed the adorable little dragon on the ground and motioned the little guy to hurry up and pay its respect. It should be said that the divine dragon had also suffered bitterly. After many trials and tribulations, she birthed the egg, then had to incubate it for a long time. Once the adorable little dragon was born, in spite of everything it refused to go home. It forced this new mother to chase after it, and had succeeded in embarrassing her to death. The adorable little dragon, with wobbled and swaying steps, turned its head back every step and shuffled to the front of the divine dragon. The angry mother dragon used a water bucket-sized forefinger and poked its head, causing the adorable little dragon to bend over like a roly-poly and, with a loud thumping sound, fall backwards. That sight was comically funny and laughable, such that Su Luo almost laughed out loud. However, the divine dragon just indifferently swept her eyes toward Su Luo. That expression was cold as ice, and a frosty air started to climb up from the soles of her feet. All at once, Su Luo could not laugh anymore. The eyes of the divine dragon contained an endless killing intent, and its ferocious expression gave off a violently irate mood. It was about to let loose a wave of dragon's breath towards Su Luo. However, just at this time, the adorable little dragon clutched at the divine dragon's finger and followed the path up its arm, wobbling and swaying as it climbed up. Finally, its tiny buttocks sat on top of the divine dragon's nose, cleanly dispersing the dragon's breath its mother was brewing. In that moment, the divine dragon and the adorable little dragon had an appearance of mutual affection for one another, of a mother and child. Su Luo's heart moved. If she didn't leave now, then what was she waiting for? If the divine dragon discovered that the adorable little dragon and her had formed a contract, she's afraid it would squash her to death with one slap of its claws. Hence, Su Luo walked quietly on the tips of her toe and retreated a few steps. After she had made some ground, she turned her body around and stealthily slipped away. Chapter 88. To come back from death's door. 1. Su Luo walked cautiously through the mountain range, hoping to find a way out. Right now her strength was very low, and she wouldn't dare indiscriminately dash around everywhere, bumping into things. As a result, she was very careful while making her way along the roads. She had already accomplished her goal for entering this mountain range. Although the process was very thrilling, her luck had been exceptionally good. There had been plenty of unforeseen perils, and no shortage of danger. Not only had her space opened, she had also formed a contract of equals with the little divine dragon by a sheer accident among many implausible causes. However, it was a pity that the little divine dragon had been carried home by its mother dragon. Su Luo sighed, slowly searched for a path to leave the mountains. However, what she did not know was that on the other side, Nangong Luoyan was about to go mad in his search for her. Nangong Luoyan's face was pale and unwaveringly fixed on the trunk of the 1,000-year-old ancient tree. His tightly clenched fist was blanched white. The ancient tree stood as before, but the wooden house that had been on the top had disappeared without a trace. For Nangong, it was as if someone had walked away, taking with them even the pots and pans, without even leaving a speck behind. As Nangong Luoyan stared rigidly at that 1,000-year-old ancient tree, his eyes were ruthless, tyrannical and cold enough to freeze everything within his gaze. On his handsome face that was normally nefarious and devilishly charming, something had changed. Now his face was a wave of astral frost. His stare was violent like that of a wild beast's, and filled with a cruel bloodlust. Nangong Luoyan could only feel a sharp pain bursting from the area near his heart. The ache was so painful that he almost suffocated. By his side stood an exquisitely beautiful woman that was elegant and quiet, seemingly above the common populace. She was dressed from head to toe in only a snowy white gown, a graceful neck, a slender waist, and just below, a skirt that seemed to flow with the breeze, as if wishing to transform into a beautiful wisp then disappear like snow melting into spring. This person was not a stranger. She was none other than the rumored Jade Lake's fairy. In a deeply concerned manner, the Jade Lake's fairy placed her hand on Nangong Luoyan, who was kneeling on the ground. Her red full lips gently and humbly stated, "Third senior brother 1. It's all Yao Yao's fault. Imposing on you until you sustained injuries, and also tiring you out until Miss Su disappear without a trace." Nangong Luoyan's complexion was like a sheet of ice. He hadn't spoken a word, but his eyes were full of self-loathing and guilt. All of a sudden, he severely slapped himself hard, quickly followed by another slap. The strength his hands used could frighten people, and with only these 2 slaps, he was able to make himself vomit blood. Third senior brother. A thread of anguish flashed across Jade Lake's fairy's eyes. She hurriedly pulled at his hands to prevent him from doing further harm to himself. "It's all my fault. If I didn't leave her, she wouldn't be." A thread of tormented pain flashed across Nangong Luoyan's handsome face, which had lost all of its original devilish charm. His strained voice hinted that he was being choked by his own emotions. What happened here? How could Luo girl have disappeared? It was all his fault. He shouldn't have abandoned her in that moment of peril. If he didn't abandon her, how could this have had a chance to occur? In the midst of blaming himself, Nangong Luoyan ruthlessly smashed his clenched fist towards the trunk of that 1,000-year-old ancient tree. The ancient tree, which had a width equivalent to 10 people that were wrapped arm in arm, fell to the ground with a bang. A large cloud of dust rose, concluding its 1,000-year lifespan. A trace of complex emotion crossed through the eyes of the Jade Lake's fairy. Her cloudy eyes were like a sublime mist, partitioning the darkness in the innermost part of her heart. She held a deeply concerned expression on her face as she said to him, "Third senior brother. Don't worry too much. Who knows what happened to Miss Su? Maybe even now she is having a fortuitous meeting? You don't understand. She doesn't any spirit strength in her body." A touch of despair passed through Nangong Luoyan's eyes. His Luo girl absolutely do not know how to harness spirit power. Alone and being left behind, how could she survive in this Sunset Mountain range when the entirety of its length and breadth was filled with wild beasts? Maybe even now. Every time he thought about it, Nangong Luoyan would feel waves of tormenting pain gripping his heart. This won't do. I must go look for her now. Nangong Luyan struggled to stand up. Because of insufficient strength, he almost fell. The Jade Lake's fairy saw Nangong Luyan's body faintly tremble, as if he could not even stand. But he still insisted on going to search for Su Luo. She was almost unable to conceal the complicated expression in her eyes. 1. Third senior brother. Chinese literal translation is third brother from the same teacher. Students under the same teacher can call each other brothers, sisters, etc., often seen in martial arts sect. Chapter 89. To come back from death's door. 2. The Jade Lake's fairy pulled on Nangong Luyan, who was tottering on the verge of collapse. Her beautiful eyes moving cleverly around, her voice sounded justifiable and honest as she said, "Third senior brother, looking at how badly injured you are, how can you go search for her? Even if you could find her, if she really was in danger, would you be able to save her?" The Jade Lake Fairy's words were reasonable and irrefutable. She had hit the nail on the head. Nangong Luyan truly had suffered severe injuries. In order to save the Jade Lake's Fairy, his abdomen had been slashed heavily by the king vulture's claws, and had bled profusely. Once he was able to finally stop the bleeding, Nangong Luyan had rushed here to look for Su Luo, only to find that she had disappeared. Third senior brother, right now your first priority is to recover from your wounds. The Jade Lake's Fairy gazed at him in concern. Believe in me, okay? I'll send people to look for her right now. I trust they'll find this Miss Su, and bring her back quickly. Nangong Luyan struggled to get up. His wounds that he had worked so hard to close had reopened. Suddenly, fresh blood spurted from the wounds like spring water wildly rushing forward. Due to excessive blood loss, Nangong Luyan's lips had turned white as paper while his face displayed a haggard appearance. Nangong Luyan firmly grabbed the hand of the Jade Lake's Fairy. Although weak, he maintained his dignified manner, and very seriously stated, "We must find her." "Okay." The Jade Lake Fairy squeezed out a smile, and solemnly nodded her head. Even Nangong Luyan failed to notice the flash of frost that passed through her eyes. After he finished speaking, Nangong Luyan sat down cross-legged, and began exercising his powers to heal himself. He needed to nurse his body back to full health. His Luo girl was still waiting for him somewhere. The Jade Lake's Fairy had successfully appeased Nangong Luyan. Seeing him begin the healing process, her beautiful watery eyes showed a look of deep anticipation, while her red lips displayed a slight superficial smile. Then she turned to leave. Beside a cliff covered with a bottomless drop covered in dense fog, the magnificent Jade Fairy stood on the edge of the cliff. Her long hair, which flowed down to her ankles, was dancing in the wind, giving the illusion that she was on the verge of taking flight, like a fairy. However, at this time, she had an indifferent and icy expression on her face. Behind her stood a row of 4 young women led by a woman named Qin Ning. Qin Ning was the magnificent Jade Fairy's most trusted attendant. The magnificent Jade Fairy's beautiful, simple, and neat face had a shallow smile. "Did all of you hear third senior brother's words? Now the only task for you is to look for this Miss Su." Qin Ning's reply was very direct. Glancing at the magnificent Jade Fairy's beautiful, cold, and expressionless face, she murmured, "Yes. Remember, if still alive, I must see the person. If dead, I must see the corpse." The magnificent Jade Fairy unhurriedly spit out those words while stressing the last 4. She continued to smile gently and gorgeously as before, so otherworldly beautiful that just a glance could drive all living things mad. Qin Ning had grown up together with the magnificent Jade Fairy, so once she heard the words she immediately understood their hidden meaning. A barely perceivable treacherous chill flashed in Qin Ning's eyes as she responded, "This servant will not fail to comply with the young mistress's command. If living, then must see the person. If dead, then must see the corpse." The master and servant simultaneously laughed together, with mutual understanding. Qin Ning led the other 3 people, and quickly walked away, while sneering in her heart endlessly. A toad that wants to eat swan flesh. An insignificant idiotic girl dares to try to snatch a guy away from the young mistress. Is she looking to court her own death? That little slut. If she is dead, then it was over. If she wasn't dead, hee. When the time comes, they will torment that slut until she wished she was dead. They will make her regret, that she was ever born into this world. Qin Ning and the three women flew through the mountain range, following the crushed plants while flying as fast as lightning. When the divine dragon had previously chased after Su Luo, it had left behind a trail of destruction, making the route fairly obvious. Qin Ning moved along this road continuously searching. Qin Ning and companions were rather lucky, as they soon ran into Lu Ruohua. Chapter 90. To come back from death's door 3. Qin Ning knew that Lu Ruohua had been with Su Luo before. After a little bit of questioning, she discovered that Su Luo had indeed been lucky enough to survive. She had even escaped from that tornado. Qin Ning gave her a sly and cold smile. It looks like their moment to earn some merit from the young princess was finally here. As a result of the directions provided by Lu Ruohua, Qin Ning was able to retrace the path that Su Luo had used when fleeing for her life. She was determined to hunt this Su Luo down. Su Luo still didn't know that Qin Ning had brought people to chase after her with the intent to kill. Right now she was in the middle of cooking a few stolen magical beasts' eggs over an open fire. During this entire afternoon, she had been constantly running away from those who wanted to kill her. Because of this, she had consumed a huge amount of her stamina. Therefore she had to fill her stomach first. Besides, in this Sunset Mountain range, who knew when her next meal would be at? Her journey's bitter experiences, after entering Sunset Mountain range, made Su Luo realize that, in this world, strength was the most important thing to have. So she urgently needed to find a peaceful place to start her cultivation practices. Seeing her dual wood and fire elements encircling her body, Su Luo bit off a mouthful of magical beast's egg. Her heart was elated. She planned to find some basic wood, fire element books to practice with after leaving this place. Suddenly, Su Luo's hand that was holding the magical beast egg paused. A feeling of impending crisis assailed her thoughts. She had spent her entire previous life working as an assassin, so naturally Su Luo was most sensitive to this kind of murderous intent. She was absolutely sure she was not wrong about this. This was not the killing intent emitted by a magical beast, but from a person. Su Luo saw the other few eggs still being cooked. Without even having to think, she picked them up and threw them into her space. She immediately headed into the forest and slipped away very quickly. Su Luo ran in a hurry for a full 4 hours. When she finally stopped, she quickly hid behind a sheer cliff. Now the sky had gradually darkened towards night. The moon was casting its hazy shadow. Su Luo slowed down and quieted her breathing. She also slowed down her heartbeat. Her entire person was hidden in darkness, blending in with the cliff within the dark night. Even master martial artist wouldn't be able to distinguish her from the face of the cliff. At that very moment, a maiden seemed to fly over from afar. Her clothes was white like snow, with a simple and neat appearance, a light blue-colored diaphanous outer layer covering her clothing. Her body gave off an exceedingly refined manner. Su Luo recognized her. She was not a stranger, but one of the maids standing by the Jade Lake's ferry's side. Su Luo had an excellent memory. As long as she saw them before, even after a few years, she would be able to recognize them at once. This was especially true for someone she met only half a day ago. Su Luo, I know you are over there, come out, no need to hide. This person was called Cui Yu. Her call was cold and devoid of any mercy. In the darkness of the night, it conjured up quite a horrifying feeling. Su Luo sneered in her mind. If she really knew where Su Luo was, then why was she still looking around in all directions? How could this be considered knowing where she was? Was she underestimating her as a good-for-nothing greenhorn who knows nothing? However, Su Luo thought this was odd. Why had this maid come looking for her? And also, why was she carrying a strong killing intent on her body? Was it because Su Luo thought of a possibility? That kind of person, clear as ice and clean as jade too. A woman seemingly not profaned by the worldly dust. Would she actually order her underlings to kill her? Although it was unreasonable, it was also not impossible. Kunan 3 said it best. If you rule out everything that was impossible, then the remaining reason must be the truth, no matter how crazy it sounded. It seemed that the Jade Lake's fairy was also human. She originally thought that she was so temperate, so lofty and unsoiled, so exceedingly refined, and so above the common people. But as it turned out, she was also a woman that would go frantically crazy over a man. Su Luo's heart smiled coldly. She must capture this girl and confirm her own guess, so she can determine who her real enemy was. Su Luo was never a person to sit and wait for death. If others want to kill her, then they must pay with their lives. Su Luo motionlessly hid somewhere below the cliff, waiting for Cui Yu to get closer. 1. Chinese divided our modern 24-hour cycle into 12 shurchen. So 1 shurchen equals 2 hours. Su Luo ran 2 shurchen here. So from now on I'll just calculate the time, without mentioning the shurchen. 2. Clear as ice and clean as jade. Idiom. Spotless, irreproachable, incorruptible. 3. Kunan is the Chinese name for Detective Conan from the Japanese anime/manga Mitanda Conan, otherwise known in America as Case Closed. Thank you, readers, for pointing out that Conan or Conan is the middle name of Sir Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle, author of Sherlock Holmes' original source of this quote, an inspiration for the anime/manga. Pretty sure the author was referring to Case Closed. Chapter 91. To come back from death's door. 4. Suddenly, in the darkness of the night, the silvery tip of a dagger shined brightly. Su Luo's body shifted as quick as lightning, and within seconds had already arrived at Cui Yu's back. Su Luo's half-broken dagger was wielded with deadly aim towards Cui Yu's throat. Su Luo's movements were precise and nimble, merciless and bloodthirsty. There wasn't a single wasted motion. Cui Yu proved to be a second-ranked martial artist. She sensed danger approaching, and slid to the left while attempting to stab the person behind with her sword. However, she was already a step too late. While Cui Yu was leaning left to avoid the dagger aimed at her throat, Su Luo had already anticipated Cui Yu's actions, and had moved the dagger there in advance. Therefore, when Cui Yu leaned to the left, she ran directly into the dagger. A schluck sound lightly echoed and a stream of blood rushed out like spring water. Cui Yu did not die immediately, but the pain caused her to roll around on the ground. The instant kill failed, because Su Luo's dagger had lost half of its effectiveness. Half of the dagger had been chewed off by the adorable little dragon previously. Therefore it was not sharp enough to kill Cui Yu instantly. Su Luo coldly watched Cui Yu rolling around on the ground in pain, and quietly asked, "Why are you trying to kill me? You must die." Cui Yu's facial features were malevolent, her expression twisted, but her chin was still unbending and arrogantly raised. "Just tell me the truth, and I'll release you from your suffering. How do you feel about this deal?" Su Luo said with a bargaining tone as she squatted down, and gave Cui Yu a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Cui Yu coldly turned her face away, not paying any attention to Su Luo's threats. In Cui Yu's eyes, Su Luo was just an ant. She would never admit that Su Luo was stronger than her. "Very courageous of you." Su Luo pulled out the blood-encrusted, half-broken dagger. Her smile was genial like a warm breeze. It did not contain even a hint of anger. "As you already know, my dagger is very dull. It can't kill a person in one strike." "Humph." Cui Yin firmly spat out. "Very good. I admire your courageous spirit. I hope you can keep it up as we continue." Su Luo's face held a faint yet sly smile. She smiled with ease while the dagger mercilessly zoomed towards Cui Yu's finger. A finger was forcibly cut off. Cui Yu was in so much pain that her tears and mucus flowed out together. The agony almost made her pass out. Without waiting for Cui Yu to speak, the second finger was quickly severed and went flying off. The third finger. I'll talk. A trace of startled surprise flashed through Cui Yu's eyes. She did not understand. Even though Cui Yu is a practitioner of martial arts, she would not be able to use such a cruel method. How was Su Luo able to do it so skillfully, and with such a gentle and soft smile, at that? It was as if what she was slicing off were not fingers but pieces of bread. This person was simply a monster. "You need not be so anxious. I haven't completely chopped them all off yet." Su Luo gestured with her hand, as if to say she still wished to continue cutting off more. Cui Yu reluctantly but loudly said, "It was the young mistress that told us to kill you. For every grievance, someone is responsible." For every debt there is a debtor. If you have the ability, then go look for the young mistress to seek your revenge. Why would she want to kill me? As expected, it was the Jade Lake's fairy who wanted to kill her. Chueyu stared at Su Luo, as if looking at an idiot. Do you really not understand? Our young mistress from when she was little until now is deeply attached to His Highness Prince Jean. They grew up together and since childhood, their mutual affection was unlike others. In everyone's eyes, the young mistress and Prince Jean was like a pair of jade amulets. As for you, His Highness Prince Jean actually kissed you. Therefore you cannot be forgiven. Just because he kissed me, thus your Jade Lake's fairy wants to kill me? Su Luo coldly smiled. Her guess was indeed correct. Yes, because His Highness Prince Jean does not allow others to get close to him. The only person who can even touch him is our young mistress. Now there is a third wheel and that is you. Therefore you must die. Chapter 92, To Come Back from Death's Door 5. So it's like that. A thread of frost appeared in Su Luo's eyes, and a barely visible smile rose from the corner of her mouth. What bullshit title, fairy? More like exceedingly refined cow dung. What being above the common populace's dirty emotions? They were all a bunch of dog shit. Nangong Luyan was so stupid that it made her want to laugh. He always bragged about being highly intelligent, but was unable to see clearly that the woman by his side had the heart of a snake and the methods of a scorpion. What about Nangong Luyan? How is he right now? A hidden meaning passed through Su Luo's huge eyes, which sparkled and were translucent like jade. The corner of her mouth had a faintly mocking expression. His Highness Prince Jean and our young mistress are together. These words were correct, but Chueyu had not told the whole truth. Su Luo nodded her head. Nangong Luyan, when you saw that the little treehouse had been wiped out, was your heart able to feel guilt and remorse? Being you were unsure of whether I am dead or alive, were you worried? Why was it that the one that was looking for me is not you? So once you have your Jade Lake's fairy, do I no longer matter to you? If I think about it this way, then the vow you previously made to me, and all that you said, are really laughable. As expected, if ever she depended on a mountain for support, then the mountain would collapse. If she leaned on a person, the person would run away. She could only rely on herself. Su Luo's pair of eyes were like water, but she had an icy cold expression that was intent on hearing the truth. Talk. How many people did your Jade Lake's fairy send out to kill me? Since they were already dispatched, the Jade Lake's fairy wanted to completely eliminate her. It seemed like this time, she really was surrounded by perils. It was extremely dangerous. Su Luo didn't know what was wrong with her. Could it be because her character was lacking? It had only been half a day, yet she had already encountered 3 cases of being chased by groups trying to kill her. She felt as if she should personally visit a temple and burn a stick of incense, pay respect to Buddha, or do anything to try and get rid of this rotten fortune. She simply had the worst luck. However, Chueyu's faces became unresponsive, and she turned her head away. Don't want to talk? Very good, extremely good. A sinister sneer appeared in Su Luo's eyes. Right now Su Luo's mood was really gloomy, and here was a person not afraid of death, delivering herself for Su Luo to vent on. This was really the only good thing going for her at the moment. Without as much as a hint of hesitation, her dagger directly chopped down. On my hand, Chueyu could only see that her entire wrist had been cut off with blood pouring out and spraying madly everywhere. She hadn't even finished when Su Luo's dagger chopped down again. Chueyu's other hand was also severed. Blood similarly madly rushed forth. I'll talk. Chueyu was in so much pain that she almost died. Her complexion was as pale as paper, and cold sweat was falling down like rain. Actually, you can still wait for a moment. Su Luo's smile was as friendly as a warm breeze, but in Chueyu's eyes, she was like a demon from Azura's hell, with an expression full of a terrible sinister intent. Apart from me, there are 3 other people. Chueyu was in so much agony that she could only grasp roughly for air. Her eyes unwaveringly glared at Su Luo, full of fierce, malicious curses. Every one of their strength is stronger than mine, and they definitely will avenge me. Really? Then let's just wait and see. Su Luo stood up, towering above her, and disdainfully looked down at her. Upon the fact that you revealed everything, I'll give you a chance, finish yourself off. No, Cui Yu desperately shook her head, at the moment when she was really at death's door. She finally become aware that she really will forever depart from this world. Afterwards, there won't be any breaths, won't be able to smell the air, won't be able to open her eyes again, blue sky, white clouds. She won't be able to see anything anymore. If I was to do it, I'm afraid I won't be able to help but to slice off your flesh piece by piece from your body. Su Luo indifferently looked at her own hands, smilingly said, I have yet to kill a person, don't want to dirty my hands because of you. Cui Yu was very wrathful, but she thought about Su Luo's ruthless methods, so she closed her eyes and furiously flung herself headfirst to a nearby rock. Chapter 93. To come back from death's door. 6 Bang. The sound resounded. Cui Yu's head cracked open. She immediately died and couldn't have been more dead. It was you who committed suicide. I certainly did not make a move to kill you. Su Luo smiled while showing off her snowy white teeth. After that, she quickly began to clean up any traces that may be left behind. Wasting no less than 1 hour, she had erased all traces. Then she advanced deep into the mountains. She knew that the Jade Lake's fairy wanted to kill her, so she only had 3 possible roads she could take. One way was to avoid the Jade Lake's fairy and find Nangong Luyan. The Jade Lake's fairy wouldn't dare to kill her in front of Nangong Luyan, but this method had a high degree of difficulty. In addition, she really didn't want to see him right now. The second way was to hide deep within this mountainous ancient forest, making sure that the other side could never find her. As for the third way, it was to kill everyone that the Jade Lake's fairy had sent after her. However, that last option, with regards to the current Su Luo, was too unrealistic. The towering, majestic mountains extended endlessly into the distance. Su Luo continuously dove into the forests of the deep mountain. Along the way, she carefully erased any trace of her passing, hoping she would not be found by the other side. She walked for about 2 hours, when a sense of danger assaulted her mind. Su Luo now had a tingling feeling along her back. She knew she was being followed by someone. Also, the person this time, like Cui Yu had said, had martial arts that were at a much higher level than Cui Yu's. Su Luo hid deep within the ancient trees and coldly looked towards the front. There was a woman wearing a light yellow-colored slip over her garments. Her breath was stronger than Cui Yu's, so she was probably a third-ranked martial artist. Su Luo was able to kill Cui Yu because of her sneak attack, but this person was already at the 3rd rank. This time, it would be difficult to handle. Su Luo blended herself into the night, as much as possible, reducing her presence. However, all of a sudden, she could only see this maiden called Huang smile coldly. Subsequently, she directly came at Su Luo with an attack. She had actually been discovered. The strength in that sword strike was not something Su Luo could block right now. Su Luo dropped to the ground and rolled away, evading that fatal attack. Right after, she lengthened her steps and dashed ahead. Su Luo knew that if she was to fight one-on-one, this person could easily and effortlessly knock her out. The current her could only evade and hide. Su Luo saw the creeper vine in the forest, and her heart rejoiced. She lifted up the creeper vine and entered a secret hidden cave. The cave was very narrow, with only a square meter of space. Su Luo's back pressed up against the cave's wall. She controlled her breathing and suppressed her heartbeat to its lowest speed, like a cold-blooded animal during hibernation. It could be sensed that she only had a trace of presence. Through the creeper vine, Su Luo's eyes narrowed into a slit. At the same time, her heart was full of wrath. Jade Lake's fairy, if you want a man, don't you know how to win him over by yourself? What kind of ability is it to kill an outsider like her? Su Luo clenched her fist firmly, a furious intent flashing through her eyes. She vowed to wait until her strength rose. She would absolutely balance this account and properly return the compliment. However, right now Su Luo could only rage inside and endure it silently. However, her attempt to forbear was too late. Because her emotions had been too stirred up, therefore, her vitality rose too vigorously. Consequently, That Huang maiden was finally able to detect a thread of difference. Seeing that the sword was about to strike towards her with a killing intent, Su Luo rolled on the ground, rushing out and leaving the small cave. She managed to escape this time's extremely close and thrilling death chase. However, a good thing didn't last forever. Very quickly, halfway on the road, Su Luo again detected that she had been locked on by Huang. This indeed was the soul of the deceased having not dispersed. Su Luo hid herself in a swamp. Her entire body was buried in the muddy ooze. She was covered in dried-up decomposing tree leaves, with only a pair of eyes exposed at the surface. She stopped her breathing, and wished that this time she could escape. However, this Huang maiden stood at the edge of the swamp. There was an unkind fury on her face, like that of someone who had long endured, but was still unable to catch that person. 1. The soul of the deceased having not dispersed, idiom, figuratively meaning the influence still lingers on. The spirit of some doctrine is still alive. Chapter 94. To come back from death's door. 7. Every time Huang was close to catching Su Luo, the opponent's movements would resemble a mud fish and slip through her fingers. Su Luo took advantage of her every careless mistake to escape, causing Huang to become extremely frustrated and unhappy. Just like now, right when Huang was about to lock onto Su Luo's entire person once again seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Huang vented her anger by launching sword attacks at the swamp. The tip of her double-edged sword sparkled with golden lightning as it flipped endless pieces of mud into the sky. Within the sword tip, spirit strength accumulated. The light that came from the sword strike was strong enough to take a life. Whoosh! A band of golden rays flashed by Su Luo's right side, striking her right arm. Su Luo felt a sudden acute pain. It was so agonizing that cold sweat broke out on her face. At that instant, Su Luo was under the impression that her right arm had been severed. It took another 2 hours before Huang's deranged venting of her fury had finally ended. Su Luo clenched her teeth while crawling out of the swamp. Her right arm was drenched in blood. The intense pain almost made her pass out. The magnificent Jade Fairy, you did well. This hatred has been engraved into my heart. Su Luo dragged her exhausted body forward until she found a creek to wash clean her wound. At the same time, she also washed her clothes that were covered with mud. Due to excessive blood loss, Su Luo felt that her head was spinning, her vision was becoming blurry, and her body was about to faint. She inwardly cried about the hardships in her heart. Right now, she really could not run anymore. If things continued this way, sooner or later, she would be captured by Huang. Suddenly, a light bulb went off in her head, as Su Luo remembered that she had her own treasured space. Although there was nothing in the space, it still contained the spirit spring. This spirit spring was a sacred commodity that had the ability to heal. Su Luo cupped her hands, drew the water from her space and drank. The spirit spring water was like ambrosial nectar, rich, mellow and full-bodied. Its pure aroma enticed and beckoned. Su Luo's previous weak mental state became a lot stronger. Her thought processes recovered completely, and she no longer felt dizzy. After drinking her fill, Su Luo again withdrew a handful of water and sprinkled it on her wounds. Although the wounds were not healed immediately, the bleeding slowly stopped. Su Luo released a sigh of relief. At long last, she had come back from death's door. She had survived. However, before Su Luo could complete her sigh of relief, she suddenly felt danger approaching from behind. Su Luo rolled on the ground and avoided a vicious sword strike. The attacker was not Huang but Nun Lu. She was among the 4 people that were chasing Su Luo with the intent to kill. Vile girl, so you were hiding here, causing your mother to search for you for a long time. Eat my sword. Without saying another word, Nun Lu directly thrust her sword at Su Luo. The long double-edged sword became numerous rays of light. In a manner of hiding the sky and covering the earth, it launched towards Su Luo. Momentarily, an unnatural gale, which was not caused by the weather, erupted. Su Luo simply could not deflect the attack. She could only rely on her speed to dodge. However, her body had suffered a severe injury, and had also lost a large amount of blood, so she wasn't as nimble as before. Su Luo was too slow to dodge, so she was hit with a piercing blow by the double-edged sword. The sharp pain that exploded almost made her faint on the spot. The wound that she had with great difficulty stopped from bleeding, once again burst open. Overwhelming pain washed over her. Su Luo clenched her teeth. She bit her bottom lip so hard that blood began to seep out. Su Luo could not fall. If she fell down now, she would definitely die. In front of her was an overhanging cliff. The drop from the cliff was deep, so deep that you could not see the bottom. It was also surrounded by heavy fog. Su Luo's eyes flashed with relentless determination. Even if she were to die, she will pull the other person down with her. However, Su Luo did fall down. She weakly fell to the ground, motionless as if she had died. Her body lacked even the tiniest sign of life. A cold smile appeared in Nun Lu's eyes. She walked to Su Luo's body, crouched down and sneered. "Little slut, you have the impertinence to seduce His Highness Prince Jin. Even if you die 100 times it won't be enough. Rest assured and go. His Highness Prince Jin will be well looked after by our young mistress." After saying this, she hoisted up Su Luo's corpse and quickly threw it over the cliff's edge. Big Sister Qin Ning had said before, destroy not only the corpse but also the evidence. However, at this moment misfortune unexpectedly occurred. 1. Hiding the sky and covering the earth, idiom, figuratively meaning earth-shattering, omnipresent, of universal importance. Chapter 95. To search for hidden treasures. 1. When she hoisted up Su Luo's corpse, an ice-cold, cruel smile could be seen at the corner of Su Luo's mouth. She twisted her body around and grabbed onto Nun Lu's sleeves, placing her entire weight on Nun Lu's shoulders. Her body was hanging upside down, with her head facing the ground. That broken dagger ruthlessly stabbed towards Nun Lu's heart from her back. Ah! Nun Lu let out a wretched scream. The fury in her heart was at its peak. She endured the intense pain, and used all her strength to throw Su Luo off the cliff. However, Su Luo was stuck to her body like Nyopi candy. 1. No matter what she did, she couldn't throw Su Luo off. At the same time, Su Luo unceasingly stabbed her with the dagger. In less than a second, countless numbers of lacerations appeared on Nun Lu's body. However, Nun Lu wouldn't let Su Luo have an easy time of it either. She finally sent a heavy palm strike towards Su Luo. The pit of Su Luo's stomach was hit by that palm. Su Luo only felt a metallic sweetness in her throat, and then a huge stream of blood wildly sprayed out. At this moment, both of them were at the edge of the cliff. The bitingly cold wind screamed through the mountains, blowing on the two bruised and battered people, who were on the verge of collapse. The sound of Nun Lu's grim laugh echoed, as she sent one foot kicking towards Su Luo. This kick contained all of her strength. She had already calculated that this kick was enough to send Su Luo down the cliff, as a way to destroy the body while erasing all the evidence. However, just at this critical juncture, Su Luo grabbed onto and tightly hugged Nun Lu's leg, which was kicking her. Because of the effect of gravity, both of them fell off the cliff. While they were falling, Su Luo used her strength to keep pulling and twisting until she was on top, while Nun Lu was beneath her. Nun Lu was so angry that she wanted to do the same by imitating Su Luo's actions, but Su Luo's foot heavily kicked her downwards. Nun Lu's heart was so enraged that she swore, if there was a next life, she would definitely dismember Su Luo's body and chop it into 10,000 pieces. But there wasn't enough time for her to think much more. Now the two of them had already dropped close to the bottom of the abyss. Splash! Both of them fell into the water. The deafening sound of water being displaced resounded, like being shot out of a geyser. Water flew high into the sky. At that moment, both of them completely lost consciousness. Both of their bodies were brutally pulled by the current of the creek, continuously colliding with obstructions in the water. Nobody knew where this water flowed to. Unaware of how much time had passed, Su Luo's eyelashes, which were thin as a cicada's wing, trembled slightly. She slowly opened her eyes and saw a rock above her head. She now discovered that the illuminations in all directions were very dim, and that she had been washed ashore by the creek water. Su Luo found that her entire body was in pain. It was so agonizing that it was as if her body had been torn into tiny little pieces. The pain was so great that she was almost numb. Su Luo fetched a handful of water from within her space, and with much difficulty she drank it. After a long while, she was slowly able to recover. She staggeringly stood up and suspiciously took measure of her surroundings. This place was a crescent-shaped cave, a cave that had been abandoned for many years. Su Luo was so weak that she could barely stand, but she clenched her teeth and stood up. She swayingly staggered towards the inside of the cave. She supported herself using the cave's wall. With great strain, she walked more than 100 meters into the cave, yet she still hadn't reached the end. This strip of dark tunnel was pitch black and gloomy, as if leading to a borderless underworld. Everything was covered in darkness. However, without knowing why, it seemed as if a mysterious power was beckoning to her. It continuously coaxed her to continue walking deeper inside. She roughly walked about another 300 meters. Su Luo kept breathing in mouthfuls of cold air. Where did this tunnel actually lead to? Could it be that there was no end to this path? She really didn't believe it. Su Luo's competitive heart was aroused. She dragged her exhausted body, step by step shuffling further into the cave. She walked a full 1,000 meters, when all of a sudden, her sharp ears heard the sound from the bubbling water of a creek. When Su Luo walked to the place where the sound was coming from, her eyes couldn't help but open wide, scanning the scene in front of her. At this moment, she thought her own eyes were seeing things. The dark tunnel ended in an unexpectedly large, circular space, which was no less than the size of a basketball court. This empty space appeared to be very spacious. At the center of this place was a purple furnace-shaped standing cauldron too. Workbenches formed a circle surrounding the cauldron. Some crystal stones and medicinal herbs were sparsely arranged on the workbenches. One nyopi candy is a sticky, stretchy caramel, like candy usually cut into rectangles and covered in sesame seeds. Here is a Chinese site that shows how you can make it. 2. The Chinese character is Ding, an ancient Chinese standing cauldron used for cooking, serving and storage vessel. Smaller version of it was used to hold wine and food during religious rituals. The Ding can have 3 or 4 standing legs. See wiki link. Chapter 96. To search for hidden treasures. 2. Not far from the workbenches, there was a bookshelf with a few books randomly placed on the shelves. However, this was not the cause of Su Luo's astonishment. What amazed her was that there were about 7 to 8 corpses lying in various positions surrounding the workbench. Every corpse was air-dried and withered, as if the owner had passed away a long time ago. It was very clear that these people had been in a very intense fight. Su Luo was in the midst of frowning when suddenly, she sensed danger behind her. Su Luo immediately dropped and rolled on the ground to dodge. Didn't know that your survival skills were so great. Even the fall couldn't kill you. Nun Lu said as she leaned on the corner wall for support. Her face displayed a duplicitous and furtive smile, full of strong killing intent. In the beginning, Nun Lu was only following orders to kill Su Luo when she attacked the other. However, at this moment, Nun Lu was itching to dismember Su Luo into 10,000 tiny pieces for her own benefit. Aren't you also still alive? Su Luo's smile was as light as a cloud and gentle like the wind. Nevertheless, a trace of apprehension appeared in her heart. The opponent was a third-ranked martial artist, while she herself had no spiritual strength. They were both injured, but by observing Nun Lu's attack a moment ago, Su Luo realized that Nun Lu's injuries were much lighter than hers. Nun Lu was about to seize this opportunity to kill Su Luo when suddenly, her line of sight turned towards the interior of the room. With just this one look, she was so amazed that her mouth fell open. Then an ecstatic expression appeared on her face. Nun Lu quickly walked into the room, full of excitement, and with an incredulous expression that looked at everything inside. She kept mumbling to herself. This can't be real, right? Could it actually be Zihua's medicinal cauldron? Is it really Zihua's medicinal cauldron? What is a Zihua's medicinal cauldron? Su Luo asked, full of curiosity. At this time, Nun Lu already viewed Su Luo as a dead person, so she felt no need to conceal anything from her. Right now, Nun Lu really needed to let out the ecstasy in her heart, or else she would go mad from holding it in. I told you you were a good for nothing, but you refused to accept it. You haven't even heard of Zihua's medicinal cauldron. Zihua's medicinal cauldron is a top-notch divine artifact pursued by all the apothecaries in the world. If they use this medicinal cauldron to refine medicine, then the rate of success will increase by 100-fold. Never mind, talking to you is simply like playing a lute to a cow. You don't even know what an apothecary is, right? Confronted by Nun Lu's belittling expression, Su Luo coldly laughed in her heart. Sorry to embarrass you, but this great one actually has a wood-fire duel system, and was preparing to level up as an apothecary. At this moment, Nun Lu looked at Zihua's medicinal cauldron in wonder. Her sword was emitting mysterious rays of light as she murmured to herself. It was said that during that time, Elder Zihua went into seclusion. Could it be that he finally died here? Elder Zihua? Su Luo again asked. Who is he? Nun Lu rolled her eyes. You haven't even heard of Elder Zihua? This renowned elder was the world's only Grandmaster level apothecary. Do you know how many famous families and noble clans under the heavens wanted to curry favor with this renowned elder? Yet you have actually never heard of this Elder Zihua. Your stupidity can't be cured. I really have nothing more to say to you. Su Luo knew that the continent's apothecaries were divided into levels: elementary apothecary, intermediate apothecary, advanced apothecary, elite apothecary, as well as grandmaster apothecary. It was extremely difficult to advance to the next apothecary level. However, apothecaries were rare, thus making every apothecary extremely precious. Su Manor's apothecary was only an elementary apothecary, but due to his existence, he was able to ensure that Su Manor did not topple for the past few decades. She never expected that the Elder Zihua was the legendary rumored Grandmaster Apothecary. It was indeed hard to imagine. Wow! Nun Lu, who was lingering in front of the bookshelf ahead, suddenly loudly shrieked. Primeval pill recipes. Unexpectedly, obscure pill recipes too is also here. Oh heavens! Jackpot! I really hit the jackpot. Obscure pill recipes was Elder Zihua's personal notes. It was a written record of his life's knowledge and experience regarding medicinal recipes. Inside, it also had a lot of primeval pill recipes which had not been passed on, and were thought to be lost for eternity. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.